Dion Nash, welcome to my podcast.
Thanks, Tom. I made it.
I'm so pleased this finally happened. I think it's worth probably opening with. So the podcast has been going about 2.5 years now. When it was maybe a month old or 3 or 4 episodes in, you reached out to me for a chat about like sponsoring, like really early on, and you were the first sponsor I had on the podcast ever.
Yeah, well, we loved it. Like you're doing some great stuff. Actually, I've been doing some research because I thought, oh man, I better see what you're talking about, see if I've got something to say. So I've spent the last couple of days just watching the podcast, and I've loved it. Real surprise ones, actually. Matthew Ridge, who knew? It's like awesome. Just all those names from the past and people that you haven't had those insights. So that was why we liked it at the start, and you've continued on. It's great.
It's one of those things that I'll never forget. So we had a meeting, and you gave me a little bit of money, and you said it's not a lot of money, but I don't have a lot of marketing money. But once other businesses see you've got a sponsor on board, maybe it'll start a sort of tipping point effect.
Yeah.
And it kind of did in a way, and I'll never forget that. It's really
thanks.
cool.
Thanks, Tom.
And I've been a big fan of yours for a very long time, as you know. There's even I even emailed you a couple of times over the years trying to buy like a small share in your company.
I know. I probably should have taken you up on that now.
No, I love what you do at Triumph and Disaster, and this is going to be a great chat. We can talk about the business stuff, rewind the clock, talk about the cricket stuff, but basically I just want to know what makes you tick, really. But let's start with these 2 little books I found.
Oh yeah.
Put out by Shell Cricket, called The Great Little Cricket Signature Book. So this is back pre-social media, when you were playing cricket for New Zealand. And I suppose people wouldn't come and get selfies, they'd just get autographs, right?
Yeah. Yes, very much.
So this was a profile of Dion Nash. So when was the last time you saw these books, by the way?
Oh, gosh. It's been a while. I'm pretty sure my mother bought one, and there's one somewhere floating at home. Margot Butcher put these out. She did it. It was ahead of her time, really. Like, this is now, bread and butter for sports people. They do it all the time on social media. But yeah, I guess, hard copy social media.
Yeah. So I thought I'll run through some of the questions that were put to you by Margot Butcher in the early 90s. And see how your answers compare now, 30 years on. Okay. So, nicknames.
Nashy would be it now, but back then it would have been Woody or Woodchuck or Dasher, I suppose.
Yeah, why Woody?
Woody was, initially when I went to university, it was a bit of a cruel nickname because I met this new bunch of guys, and some of them were older cricket guys who were a couple of years older at university than me, so I was trying to fit in. So I kept asking dumb questions. So one of these guys, Carlo Dowda, nicknamed me Woody off Cheers, because I kept asking dumb questions. And but then over time, the rest of the cricketers sort of like it became Woodchuck because how much wood could a woodchuck chuck or whatever, and then Chucker, and then all this sort of the derivatives. And I think I was always grateful for them that they evolved it to a point where it moved away from Woody from Cheers and into some sort of other. But interestingly, when I got picked in the New Zealand team when I was still at university, I was 20, and I got picked, and a whole bunch of people came up to me after I got selected for the Black Caps, and they were like, wow, I always thought your last name was Wood, because it was like Woody, so anyway, I obviously hadn't done my job in telling them my proper name.
So if you catch up with any of the old guys from the 90s now, does anyone still call you Woody?
If I hear Woody called out, I know where that person's from, right. And I know them well. Yeah.
Favorite music?
Ooh,
now versus then.
Yeah, shoot. Well, jazz is probably, if I had to pick one that I had to live with forever, I would probably go jazz. Where I think back then I was probably fully into my grunge scene. I still like grunge and punk and alternative music probably. Been doing a little Darkness sort of deep dive of late. I've been watching his podcast or channel.
Justin Hawkins.
Yeah. And I've been loving it. And he's just sort of got this really nice demeanour. But I went and saw them live at the power station, and what amazing musicians they were. And so I've sort of like been, I don't know, I find myself enjoying, which is I guess a little bit glam glam rock meets grunge, but yeah, jazz, I guess.
Yeah, 'cause back then it was blues and rock, but you've always been into your music, eh? You play guitar?
Yeah. Well, define play. Yeah, badly. Badly. I've got a Gibson SG, which is I got from America years ago. So, which always reminds me of when I was growing up. There's a guy in Dargaville where I heard a Gray Nichols 4-scoop, which was the most expensive bat you could buy back then. But he didn't know how to use it, and so I met when I bring out my SG in front of actual musicians, I always feel like that guy, and I'm like, I'm always just sort of embarrassed that I've got it, but I love it, you know.
Oh, you go right, don't you? Like you've got a fun band with Jeff Ross, the 42 Below. Are they still a thing, the Camel Toes?
Oh yeah, in fact they're trying to get something going again now. It's been a long time between drinks.
Yeah, Jeff Ross from 42 Below and Aquia Candles. Craig Innes, one of the greatest New Zealand League players of all time.
Yeah.
Is that a three-piece or anyone else?
No, we've got another guy, Nick Ross, who's our lead singer, and he's no relation to Jeff, but he's great front man. And then Hamish G from the Feelers is sort of like floats around in the background there, and Dave Rollins from Clap Clap Right pops in every now and then and does a little sort of helps. They sort of help give us a bit of structure and support when we need it. A bit of coaching.
It's like the musical version of the Black Clash, where there's a couple of
very much so. Yeah.
Worst job you've ever had? This was your answer, by the way, in the early 90s.
Well, my worst job I ever had was, it would probably still be picking squash or working in my father's timber mill. I can't. It's a pretty fine line between the two. What did I say then?
Pumpkin picking.
Oh yeah, there you go. Squash, pumpkin,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Best thing about being a cricketer. Oh, this is going to make your toes curl.
Shoot.
This is not a great answer.
Oh God, what did I say? The best thing about being a cricketer would have been the big lunches, I suppose. Something like that.
Great lunches.
There you go.
But you look back now as a retired former New Zealand cricketer and New Zealand cricket captain. What do you think now in hindsight, from the perspective of a dude in his 50s?
Oh shoot, yeah, early 50s, Dom, early 50s. What do I think now? What is the best thing? It's almost tougher to answer that retrospectively. I think the expulsion of the burden of sort of expectation and talent. I think getting a little bit of that monkey off your back and the confidence, I think that you gain from that is probably what cricket offered. I don't know if that's really answers it, but in terms of the cricket itself, I mean, I would have to say the achievement of within a team and within a group. And I did at one point our era really got it together, and the work that we had to go into doing that and understanding the sacrifices and the effort made to get to a point where we were a sort of a competitive world-class side. It took sort of probably 4 years of build-up to get to that point, and then it lasted probably 18 months or 2 years before we sort of dropped off that form. But the work and the team effort and the commitment as a group is what probably the biggest takeaway.
That is a great, thoughtful answer. I mean, the easy answer would have just been to say, like, the relationships or the friendships or whatever. I appreciate that. I even saw Chris Kens on Instagram yesterday, like, getting excited about the 25-year reunion of the 99 team.
Oh, good. Yeah, so that's cat's out of the bag. Yeah, no, well, we're trying to do that down in Wellington. I mean, well, that's probably the era of the team that, for me and maybe Kenzie and a few other people that around that time, that we got our shit together, and we, prior to that, these photos in this era, we were sort of the talented bunch of young guns, but we had no framework, no guidance. A lot of the senior players left in 92 after that 92 World Cup, so we were sort of left to our own devices to a large extent. We only had one coach at a time, and sometimes they were in and out really quickly. So there wasn't the support, and so we just were left. So that era finally got its shit together in late '99. Yeah, so that was 7 years after this.
And if there's one thing I really hate, it's what is it now?
What do I hate now?
Taxes at the end of the financial year. It's probably something really mature.
Yeah, God. Auckland Council, Auckland Transport. Yeah. Slow drivers. I think, I don't know, what do I really hate? I'm trying not to hate anything. I'm trying to be more mellow in my approach. I'm hating how hard it is for me to change my own behaviour. That's what I'm hating at the moment.
What do you want to change?
I would like to sort of be calmer and less vocal. It's like,
I suppose our interactions have only been sort of the occasional meeting or the occasional thing. So maybe I haven't spent long enough time with you, but you seem calm and mellow.
Yeah, I can. I put on a good front.
It's a mask.
I put on a good front, but no, I mean what I would mean. I think I probably am experienced. Mostly, it's around my kids and their sport and expectations and sort of any competitive environment. I was always so competitive. A competitive environment that I have no control over, which is watching my kids play sport,
Right.
for example. Oh, hello.
Oh, here he is, Kanye.
Hello.
Kanye. It's JJ here. JJ, come in.
Hey, how are you?
Everyone, how's it going? How are ya?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Do you want to?
like
do
the
you want
t-shirt.
to say good day for a second and
Oh, hey.
take over?
Oh, wow.
Tell Dion about your claim to fame.
Have you said anything to him yet?
Yeah.
Hi, Dion.
Hey, JJ.
He remembers me, so that's a good start. Do you remember your first ever interview on the radio?
No. Remind
Oh,
me. Remind me.
I thought you always remembered your firsts.
Well, I probably do, but tell me, what did I do? Did I stuff it up badly?
No, it was way back in 1991-ish,
Oh my
maybe
gosh.
92.
Yeah.
I was in Taranaki working on Energy FM.
Oh
back
no,
then.
I think I do.
And you came in for an interview and you said, "This is my first time on the radio." So,
I think I do remember that now. Gosh, that's years ago.
I know,
So we would have been at Pukekura Park. That would have been
Yeah.
for like one of those Queens. I think we would have been playing Australia. That would. Oh my gosh, that was right before it all kicked off.
it's so funny that you remember what games you were playing when I just don't even remember that. I just remember who I was interviewing.
Oh, I remember.
So-
I remember because Alan Border was playing and Pukekura Park's so beautiful. You can't forget it, right? And I remember I walked out and, you know, when you're playing in front of the absolute heroes of, like, these guys were like 35-year-old. I was like 19 or something.
Yeah.
And they were just like my heroes. And I batted so meekly and quietly, and at the end of like about an hour, which I'd survived pretty well, Alan Border said, "Well played, boy," or something like that. And honestly, my chest and my swelled like this. I walked off floating on air. I was like, oh my God, Alan Border spoke to me.
That's amazing.
So,
Was that the Richard Hadley days?
Yeah,
Was he around?
but he was just finished, I think. Too.
Yeah.
But Martin Crowe was around, and all those guys.
They are legends, eh? That was a really big time in cricket.
Oh yeah, shoot.
Okay.
Oh.
He doesn't even remember your interview. Get it?
I do.
Okay, well, it was
for
really
years-
great to see you. Okay, well, you can tell it. Fine.
Get your own podcast.
I felt like he was really interested talking to me, but it's fine. I'll leave it with you.
Drop Richard Hadley because that's the only name you can think of.
Obviously, I don't know much about cricket except you don't want to be hitting the googly. Anyway, see you guys.
All right, get out.
See you, mate.
You would have hated media commitments back then. I suppose because you're the new guy on the team. It's like, oh, get Nash to do the radio.
Oh
rounds.
gosh, I didn't. Yeah, it's like, and you were just so bad at it. Like, you know, I had no idea what to say. I do remember after getting interviewed by Paul Holmes once, and I was in London, and it was overnight, and we'd finished, and he was in the morning, so it must have been for his radio. And he said like something like, "Oh, where are you?" And we're at this cafe out on Baker Street called Cafe Susie. We're having celebrating this game, and I said, "Oh, you know, it's where Sherlock Holmes used to hang out." And there was this like really long pregnant pause when when he must have been thinking, does he think Sherlock Holmes is real?
Oh my God, that's amazing. Was that interview because when you played at Lord's?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
That's got to be to this day, one of the highlights of your life.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. Oh, shit, we've been going quarter of an hour already. There's a couple of other bits in this book. Best breakfast, Wheat Bix and cold milk coated in sugar.
Yeah.
Which is so... If you were a professional athlete now and that was your answer, yeah, I mean, it'd be good for a potential sanitarium sponsorship.
Yeah.
Best piece of clothing you've ever owned, bright yellow daisy shirt that attracts insects.
Yeah, I did love that shirt.
Yeah.
It was, I was trying. All my friends we're all a bit fruity at university, right? We weren't beer drinkers. Like most of my mates were all sort of I don't know, a bit more on the arty scene, smoked a bit of pot and hung out in the park, they were sort of like, so I sort of caught that dress code a bit. So we're always trying on different shirts and different sort of,
It's a strange juxtaposition though, between having those arty sort of friends and also being this like jock, for lack of a better term.
Yes, yeah, I think cricket probably lends itself to it more than some sports, and I don't know that, like, in some ways it was a bit of a coping strategy as well. I think a little bit of trying to make a life outside or away from that competitive environment. And I just found them really good guys as well. They were into interesting stuff, right? So they were off on ski trips or mountain climbing or going to theatre or doing stuff which was just, for my world, was like, wow, this is crazy, and interesting. So I found it like a great outlet, and I still do, like all of those mates, most of those mates are still my best mates today,
Yeah. When you look back on that guy, what are you most proud of and least proud of?
I'm really proud of that guy. Like, that guy had come a long way, he'd come from Dargaville and ended up at university, and he was on his way just about breaking into the New Zealand side at 20. Life was, I'd achieved a lot, and I didn't think of it from coming from a background that was tougher to achieve those things, but there's nothing obviously, as it turned out, I wish I could go back and give him some sound advice on how to be a professional sportsman, how to look after his body, how to how to mentally get through it, not long after this, about 2 years after this, I got a contract to go and play in England for 6 months, and that was a huge honour back there. There are only 17 international contracts in the world, so it was a bit of an ego boost, but also a huge honour. But I had no coping strategy. I wasn't fit enough, I wasn't strong enough, mentally tough enough. It was just exhausting, and so it would be nice to be able to go back and say, hey, you're about to get some opportunities. Here's some better ways to go about making these decisions.
But was anyone physically strong enough though? Like, I feel like the knowledge we have now in terms of strength and conditioning and rehab and everything else.
Yeah, no, not really. And the ones that were got lucky, I think, and I tried really hard when I went over there, and it was just so long. Like, we would play, and if you're in a successful team, which I was, you would play a 4-day game, and then in the middle of the 4 game there'd be a 1-day game, so that meant you were playing for 5 days in a row, and then there was always a 6th day, which was another 1-day competition, and these competitions just sort of began and ended. So if you're a bad team, you dropped out earlier and you got a bit more of a break, but if you kept winning like we did, it meant you were playing 6 days a week for 6 months, and then quite often on the 7th day you'd drive to the next venue, which would be, every second week would be away. So I remember one day we finished on a Monday or Sunday or whatever it was, and ended up driving to Durham from London. It's just like a 7-hour drive or something. So it's just crazy,
Is that why your back ended up fucked? Just too much cricket?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I always remember Tom Moody, this West Australian, big tall guy. He was the Worcester pro. And I played against Worcester. I did quite well against him. And after the game, he pulled me aside and he just came over, and it's just me and him sitting at the table. He goes, man, you got to learn how to bowl within yourself, and just slow down a bit, go off a short run. Otherwise, you're never going to last. And I was like, I remember thinking, is this Aussie guy trying to stitch me up here and have me on? And I was like, but he was the only guy in the whole time who tried to offer me some actual sound advice. And I just wish I had listened.
Oh yeah, but there's that saying that youth is wasted on the young.
It's so much,
it's like too much testosterone or something.
Man,
I did one of those Treasure Island shows years and years ago with Dooley, and he was fucked as well. Like there was some nights where he couldn't even lie down properly. His back was that sore. Are you okay now?
Yeah, no, I'm good now. I am. I've got a new hip. Just got a new hip replacement, so that's all good. No. Back-wise, sweet. I think generally it's helped me keep fit, because I'm sort of conscious that got to stay on top of my physicality just to avoid all those things because, like Dooley, I had stress fractures either side, disc collapsed. So those things never fully heal. So you sort of just put up with them, but you sort of just become stiff and a bit, that fuses itself over time. But yeah, no, Dooley was, we played a lot together, Dooley, and we used to share our Voltaren dosing. It was a bit like, we'd dose up. He always had, Dooley was a big fan of the ones that you put up your bum, and I was like, I remember having to try them one. And I was like, Dooley, I think I just stick to the swallow. I'll run the risk with the stomach ulcers.
Bro, the suppository gets into your blood. How much quicker? How much time are you saving?
Oh, mate, we had it all down pat. If you take an aspirin with them, it thins the blood, gets through faster. It was like, yeah, sweet.
Is that a true story?
Yeah, man. We were all swapping notes. Yeah, it was like... Yeah.
Okay, let's. There's so much about the cricket stuff that I want to get into, but I reckon first of all we'll focus on the business stuff. So you finished playing cricket for New Zealand. Then I've listened to heaps of podcasts you've been on, and the story goes you were working out at a gym or something. And Jeff Ross, who's done very well for himself with Ikoya and before that 42 Below, he comes up to you and you asks you what you're doing. Did you know him? Did you have a relationship with him? Or
well, it actually wasn't. It wasn't Jeff. It was his business partner. So Grant Baker was sort of like the. There was this. They had this great sort of duo, and Grant Baker was the business head in the Nous. Steve Sinclair was the sort of numbers guy. Jeff was the sort of the creative. So they were this sort of magical team. So I went to a gym with one of them, and then they just sort of said, "Come in, what are you doing with yourself?" And I said, I'm going to do a bottled water, I thought, I'll do this bottled water. And he goes, we want to do a bottled water, come on in and meet the team. So, and he said, bring in your business plan. So I was like, yes, sweet. So I went home, went to Bernie. I don't even think we were married. Or maybe we were, but I said, shit, I've got to business plan.
Was there Google then or no?
No, shit, no. No, this is like, I don't know. Yeah, 2003 or something. Yeah, I don't know. It was a long time. But anyway, it was a great introduction and met them, and they pushed my business plan to one side pretty much straight away, and said, okay, well, let's have a look. Come and do it with us. We'll build the plan together, shall we? So that was and that was like Business 101, it was just like coming inside with these some hard-nosed young sales guys, some really creative guys, and just this energy entrepreneurial energy that was just happening at the time in an exciting category. Vodka was blowing up around the world. It was sort of, parties were sort of all involved all the time. So you felt like it was like just fun. But at the same time, you're learning all these quite good business sort of things. And it was all about sales like that. When it sold, everyone had a go about 42 Below being just a marketing story, but internally, the culture was so hardcore sales, right? Every Monday morning, we'd have these meetings, and it was like from the person on the front desk to the, accountant, if you all expected to have sold something in the last week, and so it was just either to friends or family or overseas. And so it was a really good environment to learn and cut your teeth in.
So what was your job there? Were you sort of in marketing?
No, so we did a water business on the
420,
and so they let me, I bought in 25%, and they funded 75%, and we were sort of a subsidiary of the 42, and we would go and try and sell it into the bars. The idea was, people would drink a water every now and then between their drinks, and corporate responsibility was starting to come in. So there was this idea that, and if we could call it the 420 water, as the water that's in the vodka, so it's pure, driven snow and all that sort of stuff. So it was that was the idea, and it sort of worked quite well. We were going okay, and then it got sold it got tagged along when Bacardi bought the vodka. So it was a good exit, and after I don't know 2 years, maybe 18 months, 2.5 years actually. Sorry, it was like in and out, and it's like, wow, this business life's
it's easy. Did you do quite well out of it?
Oh, well, I got tagged along, so we were all part of the 42 Below shares. We all had to buy into the big company, and then I had to buy into that one, and that got valued. And and probably a generous valuation, to be honest, because it was like, let's just get this deal done. You know, no one wants to mess around. So it was just sort of easy, you know. And I didn't have to actually do, like, I'd done all the building of the business and the branding and the selling and traveling around. I'd done and sourcing all. So I'd done all of the work, but when it came to selling it, I just got tagged along. So I didn't have much to do in that part of it.
Yeah, I feel like this is part of your, like, I've listened to so many podcasts over the last few days with you on, and you do seem to downplay a lot of stuff in your life. Is this...
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know.
Like, when you've done something well, are you good at owning it and saying, yeah, I fucking did really well then? Or are you just a deflector?
Well, I'm from Dargaville, right? And it's like, if you... I don't know,
tall poppy thing?
Yeah, I think so. You just like... I was conscious growing up that I was a show-off, right? And, you know, you stand out when you're a show-off in a small town in New Zealand, and sometimes that's good, sometimes not so good, you know. And I remember being very much aware of when I was sort of probably too late catching on that I'd just push myself out into the middle of the ring, you know, without realising it, you know what I mean? And then it's like, I was now, you know, I've done it again, you know. And then, you know, sometimes I'd be able to box my way out of it, and other times, you know, there'd be too many people to take down, you know. So it was like, so I think partly that forms it, but then the other part is like internally, I don't know, there's not, I think I could probably do with being a bit easier on myself. That's part of, like, I think what I was talking about before, you know, trying to reshape or reframe that mindset so that it's you know, less self-critical and maybe, but it's also hardwired to some extent, you know.
It's hard. Yeah, you and I are about the same age, and so yeah, being a blowhard was a thing. The last thing you wanted to be was a blowhard, which I suppose part of being a blowhard is like just talking yourself up about anything.
Yeah. Well, I just would. Mine was more physical. I would like, because I was quite good at most sports or doing anything, so I would always just show off physically and verbally, but like physically mainly, you know. And then when I jump on the court, having bare feet, and everyone else has been practicing whatever, and I'd throw a three or something from on the basketball court, and just, you know, I couldn't help myself but get in everyone's face and tell them, you know, and that stuff like that, you know, just times 100.
Oh yeah, because you were really good. You were just a good all rounder, right? Good at cricket, obviously, but good at rugby and basketball as well. A lot like Jeff Wilson.
Oh, Jeff
obviously he was a bit of rugby player.
Well, Jeff was an amazing all rounder. Yeah, I mean, Jeff was my competitor in cricket early on for sure. Like, I actually, to such an extent, we would been going at it from an age group. He was the number one all rounder, and I was like the pretender, up and coming almost. He's 6 months younger than me, I think, but he was the one in the South Island, and then I came late into it. I grew late, so I sort of all of a sudden I was challenging him, and we just used to go head for head, you know, and it was like, it was great. But you'd do something well, and he, instead of him trying to put you down, Jeff would just come out and do it better the next time, you know. And so then you were like, well, I'm going to do it better. And so, and we ended up playing together at Otago, and it was like that. And it was such a healthy competition. I've never known any competition after that was as healthy as that, because he had this inner belief that he was so good, whatever you did, he'd do it better the next time. And so we used to beat teams by us two fielding it mid on and mid off in cricket, and we would just compete each other. Like, he'd dive for a ball and I'd miss it by 6 feet, right? And I'd be like, oh, what are you doing, you show off? And then eventually he'd do the same thing, and then he'd get a fingertip to it, he'd jump up, run after it, pick it up, throw, and run the guy out. And I'd be like, so then I'd have to try and do the same, you know. And so we were just competing each other. We weren't even worried about the opposition we were playing. So when he got picked for the All Blacks, it was just like, I didn't even see it coming. I was like, oh my God, this like guy's been pulled out of my life who I'd been competing with. And yeah, obviously he's a great rugby player as well.
Great All Black. Yeah, it's mind-blowing, really. I guess, so back to the business stuff. So yeah, so 42 Below sells to Bacardi. You still work on Bacardi though, right? I heard a story, this is where the idea of getting into skincare came about. Some dude in New York was moisturising his hands?
Yeah, well, I sort of like, I left when the guys left, so we all, you know, got out, and then the guys set up a thing called the Bakery, and they invested in about 5 businesses, and I invested in one, which was a outerwear, sort of like a Gore-Tex, a natural Gore-Tex outerwear using merino wool. Anyway, after about a year, the science of it failed. We couldn't get enough hydrostatic head, and so it's sort of like we just decided we've lost on that one, so we'll do that. And then I got they asked me to come into the beer, and I was like, actually I'm sick of doing alcohol, so I just sort of said, no, I'll step aside. And at that time Bacardi needed a marketing director, so they said, well, would you like to come back in and work in the marketing and work under Bacardi? So I was like, yeah, it sounds interesting. And so I did that for 3 years after from there, and I probably learned more about what not to do, or just like how different corporate life is to entrepreneurial life. But it was probably ultimately a bit frustrating, because it's trying to make a decision within a big corporate structure that I found really hard.
So much red tape and
or just
levels.
you'd take a rainbow and everyone would feel compelled to add a new colour to it, or to just change the colours a little bit slightly. And so by the time you got to the end of it, you sort of had this grey cloud, because everyone had messed with it, and it's like trying to get that idea through, that was really hard within that environment. And I sort of found it challenging, but I learnt a lot, and I sort of also learnt the confidence to realise I knew enough about business at that point too. It was almost like an endorsement of what I'd learnt with the entrepreneurial guys, because I was able to walk into meetings with guys with double MBAs and hold my own, and bounce back ideas, and because I'd worked on the streets selling and doing all of that, I sort of knew the business inside out, whereas some of them had come in at the top level and didn't really. They knew the theory and they had jobs above me, but having that confidence of knowing what I was talking about was gold.
So why skincare?
Yeah,
It's such a random thing.
It
What year
is
did you have the idea? It's so random back then.
Well, it was random. Well, mainly because I was trying to find something to do myself. The challenge was I was ultimately bored. Bacardi asked me to move to London and live over there, and at that stage we had, I think, 1, if not 2 kids, very young. And I just thought, I'm going to be on a plane the whole time away. Bernie's going to be stuck in London by herself with 2 kids. It's not conducive. I'd already lived in the UK, and I just thought, I'm not super inspired about being in this job, and I was like, if I'm going to ever leave, I was still in my 30s, if I'm ever going to leave and have a go at doing my own business, it's now or never. So I sort of took redundancy instead and left, and went in. The story you were referencing, my last meeting was with an agency. It was in New York, and it's about probably 2009, I guess. And there's the coolest guy in the room was this guy with a waistcoat and a sort of a arm sleeve tattoo, And about halfway through the meeting, he pulled out a woman's hand cream, and he sort of like rubbed it on his hands, and I was like, what the heck? And I was like, and I sort of would just pondered on that on the way home, and it was like, I've always used moisturiser because of cricket, we're in the sun. I remember reading an article on Rod Stewart and how the secret of his youth, and he'd said, you always wear oil of Olay, and I was like, shit, my mum's got some of that. So I remember like filing through her cabinet when I was about 18 and finding this pink pot of oil of Olay and going, that'll do, and hiding it in my cricket coffin. I nearly got busted by Ken Rutherford when I was playing at Otago. He would have been, I thought he was this grizzly old guy. Thinking back, he must have been about 32, But like I was like about 19, 18. And I'm sitting in Carisbrook back then. You used to have to come under as the old Carisbrook, and the dressing room was up the stairs and at the back, and so it's quite a long walk. And Ken was a tantrum thrower, really bad. And so we'd just finished bowling. He was open the batting, got out cheaply, and I'd been in the shower, so I was oblivious to all of this. So I've got out of the shower and I'm dipped my hand into this pink pot of moisturiser, and I'm mid downstroke. And the door slams open, and this bat goes flying across, smashes into the opposite wall, and then Ken just sort of stops and he looks at me as I'm like, got my hand on my face, and he goes, "What are you freaking doing?" And I was like, he goes, "Why are you putting sunscreen on this time of day?" And I was like, never be too safe again. And all I could think of was so far outside his framework that I could be putting a moisturizer on. His hard otago man. It was like it didn't even exist to him. So I was like, that's the only thing that saved it. So I always thought if I could build something that was cool enough that if Ken Rutherford caught me using it, it wouldn't be the end of the world.
Because it was so innovative by the way, that's an interesting story. Like we'll get into more of that with the cricket stuff because it's interesting how different people react. And I feel like behaviour like that probably wouldn't be acceptable now.
No, it's probably still the odd one, yeah.
But like it doesn't seem very innovative now under the 2024 lens. But there's so many competitors, as you'd know better than anyone. But back then, like, I've always been a moisturiser guy, but I think there was maybe a limited Clarins range or L'Oreal perhaps for men. But there was fuck all, right?
Yeah. And what I found actually, weirdly, because I used it because it really did help in cricket, right? You're in the sun the whole time, like you'd come in and after a full day in the sun and you just like wanted some relief, and that's why I used it. And then to get this, then it extended to getting the sunscreen off. You used a scrub I remember there's a Blackmore's scrub which they don't make anymore, and I remember going when I finally realised it was selling out. I went around to about 4 chemists and tried to buy up these things.
Oh, like a facial scrub.
Yeah, and it was like, because they didn't have it, and it was just like felt so good to clean all that shit off your face and then to moisturize. But I remember like buying all the expensive ones as I started to earn money. I'd start buying expensive ones or borrowing girlfriends' ones or stuff, and I just found that actually the way a guy uses it, I want it on and gone. I wanted to slap it on. I want instant hydration, which oil of Olay was awesome for. And so I was like, man, so I sort of stuck with that. And then when it came to developing the product and the range, I was like, man, I've got this sort of industrial knowledge. If I just applied it and then applied the branding and the marketing side that I'd learned at 42, I thought, if I'm into it, maybe there's a market there. That was sort of the extent. If I did it all again, I think I would probably challenge myself harder around, the perfect. I'd start with the biggest possible field of who can buy this thing, and then work backwards from there. And because the perfect business is something that you can make, and it's one product, and everyone in the world needs it all the time. So if that's the perfect business, sort of like you want to sort of like keep as much of that in the framework as possible. Yeah, but
your products are cool and they're very good as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I love them. I think early on I messaged you as like, have you considered doing an under eye serum? So I think I've been more forward than maybe your average customer.
Oh no, we've appreciated your feedback all the time actually. So no, we've got a long history of every time you would pop up on the online order where people would run up, Dom Harvey's purchased.
Yeah, I love giving it as gifts. They're just great products. It just seems like such a fascinating thing to get into. Like you wouldn't know where to start. But you look back now. So how old's the company now? 13?
Yeah, now 13th. Yeah.
13,
so, yeah.
Are you happy with the name you chose? You're happy with everything else?
Oh, I would do loads of things differently. I love the name. The name's personal to me. Comes from that Rudyard Kipling poem "If," which my dad, who just passed away, actually, he gave it to me when I was about 13. I wasn't I was a mouthy, lippy, shitty son for most of my teenage years. So, and he was a stoic farmer, so we didn't talk a lot. And I remember him coming home from Auckland, just throwing this plaque down on my bed one day and saying, "Read that, boy." And I sort of graffitied all around the outside of it, but I didn't touch the poem, and it was such a beautiful poem with all these wonderful pieces of advice, one of which is if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same. But it's all these other things like, if you can walk with kings and not lose a common touch, if you can, heap up all of your winnings and risk it on one coin toss and lose and never breathe a word of your loss. There's just these wonderful ideas as a young man.
I got goosebumps just hearing this.
They're just wonderful. Like that one that putting all your winnings and losing it all and never breathing with it, still I'm the same. I just get sort of like, oh man, that's such how life is, right? You've got to live that way, the risk and reward and humility and honor, all those things. So so I'm the name's great. I also think even if you don't know the poem, the idea of our lives are part triumph and disaster, using skincare as part triumph and disaster. So I like all of that. I think I would Probably I should have moved to America if I'm really honest. Because it's a niche. Businesses that probably I think haven't done as good a job as I did have already blown up and sold in America in the same time frame. So you have to be in a big market and where there's breadth and size. New Zealand's been great, don't get me wrong, but it's ultimately 5 million people, spread across a whole country. So we've had to do it the hard way by travelling and doing distributors and things like that. But it's also got to fit with your lifestyle, right? So I wanted my kids to grow up here. I love New Zealand, love living here, and our lives have been great in a whole bunch of other ways by staying here. So you can't, I wouldn't change anything really.
It's hard, eh? Like 1% of the New Zealand market versus 1% of the American market. Mate. 1% of the American market, you're hanging out with Zuckerberg. And what have been the hardest challenges? Because you've been through a lot, the global financial crisis. Were you just after that, or
just after?
Right,
yeah,
okay.
So just after, sort of started out the end of that. The biggest challenges are always cash flow. And managing that and dealing with the fear of running out of money and the fear of spending all of the, we sold our house when we started it, and I took a bunch of money off out of that and put it in, and then you walk around with this sort of guilt of like spending not just my money but my wife's money, so there's all of those things. But look, it's been, learning how to manage staff, learning that I've had so many great staff all the way through, but staff leave, Sometimes you've got to let good staff go too, just through circumstance. That's horrible. Other times good staff leave, and that feels like, that's that feeling of like, you can't help but feel that a bit let down, but it's just their life that they're going on with, and so then you've got to sell the dream to the new person whilst feeling a little bit hurt that the person's left,
Like a breakup.
it's like, there's all these things you got to learn how to manage, and I didn't have any experience with any of that. This last bit with the pandemic was really hard. I think emotionally, a lot of small businesses in New Zealand have been emotionally wrung out. The people who own small businesses in New Zealand by proportion of the population is a really small percentage, right? And so no one cares. Everyone, if you're a business owner, everyone just assumes you're going to be rich or you're rich or whatever. They don't give a stuff that what you've had to go through to get there. And that's fair enough. Everyone's in their own journey. But I think through that period, you had to carry the worries of all of your staff. You had the uncertainty for all of them, and financial uncertainty, and just their anxieties and their partners' anxieties, and whilst not knowing what the future for your own business was. So there was a big period of time through there where it was like just emotionally draining. And I think coming out the other side, a lot of the businesses that maybe are no longer, or small businesses have just wrapped up, was probably more the emotional exhaustion than the financial side of it in many cases. So I think that was tiring, getting through that, and now of course right now it's again really tricky. So
just constant challenges, eh?
Yeah. Well, actually, Shane McKillen, who was actually the guy who got me into 42 Below, and he always said, business is just solving problems, and it's sort of true. Like, it is just solving the next problem and finding a solution.
And just accepting that there is just constantly going to be another ball to face.
And I think that's the difference to sport. See, sport, you have like there's an end to it. You get to play a game, win or lose, and then celebrate or start again. Whereas with business, it's sort of like just constant. There's not really any end. And I think that low level constant pressure is harder for me to deal with personally than peak pressure. Like, I used to relish the peak pressure, not always succeed with it. Sometimes that would, you'd fail miserably under it, but I sort of enjoyed that. Whereas the long, slow sort of grind pressures, I find a little bit more tiring, or you've got to find coping strategies to deal with.
Has there ever been any occasion where you've thought about just closing the doors or just throwing it in, selling it to someone
in the last week, or over the whole time, like every second day? No, nah. Oh yeah, look, yes and no. I think you have bad nights early on. Early on, you have lots of bad nights where you can't sleep, and so you spreadsheets become your friend, because especially when you're burning money ahead of the curve, like it's unavoidable, right? You're only making 50k a month, and you're spending 70k a month. It's like, far out. This is how much longer can I keep doing this for? And so the spreadsheet. When you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Can I tell my wife? And then so I used to, when I had those nights, I'd go and I'd just open up a spreadsheet and I'd like run all the numbers, and I'd be like, how many shops do I have to get? How many units do they have to sell? And I'd just like do all the math, and I'd get to the end of it after an hour or so of like pointless exercise, and it'd be like, oh, I've only got to get 15 more accounts. Okay, I'll just go and do that. But that was sort of a coping strategy for a while. And then at a certain point, you learn to deal with all of that.
Just the ebbs and flows of business.
Yeah.
And what about the future of the company?
Well, it's not done yet. And I guess, coming back to your point about, before getting too congratulatory.
Patting yourself on the back?
Yeah, before I get like that, I think I don't feel like it will have really succeeded until either it's making so much money that I can step out of it and not have to worry, or it's worthwhile for someone to buy it, and those two things are still a wee way off. It's like we've got I'm an employee, I get paid by the business, but it's there's still a growth curve needed, and a lot of that has been extended out a few years due to that COVID. So, and not alone in that, that's probably 3 years of going sideways we didn't account for.
Knowing what you know now, you just wish you stayed in marketing. Maybe not with Bacardi, but
no, I don't. I am really proud of what we've done and achieved, and I've just personally, it's so stimulating. I got into it because it was the only thing that scared me, and I needed that. I needed to be playing for real, and I felt like I still am. I'm still in the game, which keeps me getting up. I get up every morning. I love going to work. I'm trying to find new ways to build the business. There's always new things to learn. Would I've liked to have done it quicker, better? Yes, of course. But what would I do after this? You got to do something with your time, right? And so I think staying sort of stimulated is super important for me, and as long as I'm stimulated, I'm okay.
Yeah, I agree. Like I even think like retirement is a bit of a hoax in a way. Like you need a purpose, eh? Like you need a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, I think, well, my father worked till he was 84. He sold his farm at 84. And I reckon, that was sort of the benchmark. It's like I sort of feel like you've got to just keep working. You've got to be stimulated, right? I think there's different ways of work. I think, dropping back to 4 days a week, doing different types of work. If you're grinding out the same work over time, maybe that becomes a bit more tiring. But yeah, you got to be stimulated, involved. But I also just like, I'm enjoy my kids' sport and coaching, and just getting involved in other parts of the community now as well. So I think, dare I say it, like community is where it's at. Yeah. I think like you got to be involved. That all the ills that we see out there at the moment. My big thing is like lots of people have lots to say about it, but fuck all, people are getting out and getting involved in their community.
Yeah. Oh, good on you. Okay, well, let's get back to the early years. So you're from Northland, Dargaville?
Yep.
And what sort of farm? What sort of farm were you raised on? Was it a dairy farm?
No, thankfully. No. I was the worst farm boy ever. Like I came off the farm not really being able to drive a tractor. Could hardly ride a motorcycle. Was dangerous with a gun. I was like, you know, shoot, I got all the shit jobs. Dad would like, you know, I had to go and round sheep, and we had dry stock, so sheep and cattle. And I just used to, man, I think back now and I cringe at how I performed. I remember driving across the farm one day and sulking, and Dad was, and you know, I was trying to make it, and would have been about 14 or 15, something like that, maybe 16.
Just that age where you started to push back and challenge authority.
Man, and I just said to my father, I said, you just don't get it, Dad. And he goes, he looks at me and I go, I'm a racehorse, not a Clydesdale. And as soon as the words came out of my mouth, I was just like, I never worked so hard as I did that day, you know. I was like, oh man, I've just lost a year's grace, you know. I can't. It was so bad.
What did he say? Like an old grizzly farmer from up north? Did he just bite his tongue?
He didn't need to say anything, right, because I was so embarrassed once it came out. I was like, oh.
Where did it come from? Did you see it on a movie or a TV show?
No, I don't know. I just felt like he was working me too hard.
Yeah.
Like, you know, all my mates would be at the beach and I'd be going out, you know, feeding out hay or doing some sort of shitty fencing job, and I was just like, oh man, come on.
So, yes, so he was older, eh? Your dad, like he was.
Yeah. So dad
in his 40s when he had you.
42, I think. Yeah. So So I'm the baby of 6.
And a disabled sister.
Yes. Well, she was the next one. Sharon. So she just had the umbilical cord around her.
Right.
And because it's a small town hospital, they didn't really. If she had been in Auckland, probably would have been fine. They would have just got onto it quicker. But you know, I don't know, 10 seconds too long with our oxygen at the birth, and that sort of causes that brain damage. She's wonderful, you know, and emotionally huge part of the family, but you know, couldn't live in a flat by herself or cook a meal for herself. She could go and get herself sort of organised, but can't talk, so non-verbal, but but totally, you know what she's on about, you know, in terms of particularly if it's an emotional thing, she's. And I think to that end, you know, she's sort of almost the core of the family in a way.
Fuck, I can't imagine how tough that was for your parents in particular. I've got some friends like that, Joe and PJ, who are just wonderful parents.
Yeah.
And they've got a son and daughter, and the daughter, similar sort of thing at birth, and they'd go away on family holidays, and Vonnie just couldn't adjust to the time zone, so she'd be up at 3 a.m. stomping around. And then, like later on, they'd just go on holidays with Sean and leave Vonnie behind with a caregiver. And, you know, they're just the most wonderful parents and the wonderful family. But I can't imagine the guilt they felt even doing that.
Yeah, And I look, to be honest, like I remember, you know, I when it was just me and Sharon at home, I remember going and waiting at the bus stop, you know, and standing to one side, not really associating, you know. And I always look back and I'm like, you know, what can you do? You're young and stupid.
You're cruel. Kids are cruel. You don't even realise that. What was what was your relationship like with your dad? Like, because it's, I mean, you and I are in our early 50s now, so it doesn't seem that old at all. But when you're young, you just want to, I don't know, I'm probably projecting here, but you just want to fit in with everyone else. You don't want to have an old dad.
No, and Dad was an old dad. Actually, weirdly, I think, at the end, they stayed really young, but when I was young, they seemed really old, you know, because all my mates, they had 30-year-olds, and my dad, mine were 50s, you know, and it was like, and I mean, how did I get on? Oh, look, Dad was great, but he was an older dad, so he'd been through the mill with everyone, you know, and
baby of the family, his job's done.
Yeah, you know,
the older kids can raise you.
And I probably benefited from that, but also probably rallied against it, you know, like I probably wanted, but he was always involved. Mum and Dad drove me, Mum's interesting as well. Like Mum was a paraplegic, so Mum was in a wheelchair from about 22. They got married when they were 20, so they got married real young, and through a medical misadventure, she had an appendix, and something went wrong, and they damaged her spine in the operation. And then when she had my oldest sister, like that that exacerbated it, and so she sort of lost the use of her legs. And so, you know, mum and dad had to live through all of that, and, you know, it wasn't like a complete, it didn't happen like just like that, you know, it happened over 10 years that she sort of lost, and people tried to have operations to fix it. So that would have been a really trying time, way before I was born. And so I sort of like always felt a little bit like, man, these guys have been through a lot, and, you know, they're driving me all around the place, and so I was always sort of quite grateful. But yeah, it always felt like the Nashes were turning up. You know, I'd turn up and Dad would turn up in a big Falcon, and an old dad with mum in a wheelchair and my handicapped sister, and I was like, and then I'd be like this, like running off to play cricket, you know. So it was a bit of a
Like
scene.
you get older and you have so much guilt about that stuff, eh? Like you look back, but at the time you just want to fit in and be like everyone.
I was just trying to get out into the middle as quickly as I could, but yeah.
And what about the rest of the family? Because in one of those books that I started with, there's a throwaway line in there. It was like, you say something like, your greatest achievement in cricket is getting your brother to turn up to one of your matches?
Yeah, well, he wasn't much of a cricketer. He was my brother was, I think he thought he was Jim Morrison for a while, so he was a bit of a loose rugby player from up north, you know. He was a very talented rugby player, talented artist, but ended up working on the farm with Dad. So I think he had his own battles with Dad, I think. So yeah, the classic oldest son, expected to work on the farm, and, you know, I think he was just, you know, needed to probably get away himself. But no, he eventually came around to enjoying cricket and watching it, and they're all really proud of me. So, and, you know, I've got great relationships with them all, really, but they all are quite different, you know. And I think you do over the course of that nature nurture thing, you know, I am different to them, you know. I grew up in a different era almost to them, you know. They were in almost 60s, 70s children, you know, and I grew up really full at least a decade, if not more, 15 years different. And it's just different times. Parents were much more chilled out. All the dramas of, you know, whatever that kids got up to back then had run through, and I was just left to walk through walk through behind. You know, it was pretty sweet.
Was it quite a strict discipline household though? Like,
yeah, it was. Dad was. We grew up. Mum and Dad were Catholic, so they grew up in like quite a. Not super religious, but it was always there. You expected to go to church on a Sunday, and I rallied against that quite. You know, I just couldn't understand why I had to do that. And you know, and Dad was quite a strict guy. Like, he was a boxer and a hard worker, and so, you know, between all of those, there wasn't a lot of sort of give and take. You know, it was like, here's how it's going to be, and, you know, like it or lump it. You know, so, but, you know, there was always love and care, and you know, I never felt physically threatened, or, you know, I had a great upbringing, really. But, you know, you do rally against discipline, I think, as a youngster, don't you?
Yeah, that sounds so similar to mine, like religious household.
Yeah.
I look back, it felt like I was getting whacked with the belt all the time. All the time. And Mum would never do it. She'd be like, oh, you wait till your father gets home.
Yeah, wait till Dad gets home. Shit,
and then hours later, we'd be over the bed getting the belt for something you couldn't even remember what. And then if we got in trouble for something and Mum couldn't prove if it was real or not, she would just be like, well, God will punish you. God sees everything.
Shit, I remember being marched up by the nuns, marched up in the middle of the afternoon for something I'd done at school, and I was just like, all I could think of was like, you guys have got no idea how bad this is going to be when my father gets home. Like, please don't take me in there. Please don't take me in there.
Fuck, yeah, I did that once to the police. Me and a bunch of mates, we had some little fireworks, like double happies or whatever. And we went round and we were like, knock on someone's doorstep, light one, and then run away. And then we got taken home by the police. And I was, after Leroy and Matthew got dropped off, I was dropped off, and I was like, please, can you just drop me off around the corner? Like, you don't understand what's going to happen to me. And I was probably 15, 16 at the time. I don't think I got a whack that time from memory, and I think that was sort of the line in the sand. Like, I didn't get a whack after that.
Yeah, there's definitely stepping points, right? But,
So then, so you So you finished your school in Auckland, right? So you're in Dargaville. You go to, is it Auckland Grammar for your final?
Auckland Grammar, finishing school, yeah.
So were you just like were you just like an outrageous talent? So they were like, we need to harness this talent and get this kid to the big smoke, or?
I never felt that. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I was obviously talented. I'd made it all the way through. I was playing rep cricket for Northern Districts, and we played a tournament in counties, and out that way, and with Pukekohe, and I remember seeing my father talking to the Auckland coach. We were playing Auckland. And I remember thinking, like, Dad would never speak to the coaches, you know. So I was like, what's he doing speaking to the Auckland? He probably doesn't even know that's the Auckland coach he's talking to, you know. And anyway, I remember, so we hopped in the car after the game. It was the last game of the tournament. We drove home, and about halfway home to Dargaville, he goes, how would you feel about going to Auckland Grammar next year? And I was like, yeah, sounds great. And then the opposition coach was the Grammar cricket coach, Graham Sims, and I don't know what sort of deal they'd worked out, but next thing I knew, I found myself sort of arriving down at Tibbs' house on Mountain Road, and I was enrolled at Grammar, and yeah, then it was just like, it was sort of magic, you know, like I was all set to do my final year at Dargaville High, and that would have been fine, you know. I was playing senior club cricket for Northland. I was already sort of on my way. I'd been recognised as at that stage, so I probably, but where it did change was like just my schooling and coming across that winner's attitude that they have at Auckland Grammar. You know, like I ended up getting in the first 15 as the squad as well, you know, and I remember walking in going into the headmaster's office after being picked in the first 15, and he sat everybody down, and just John Graham, and you know, he was this man of immense mana and sort of staunch and he just goes, I just want you all to understand, everybody who plays you this year will play their best game of rugby against you. And he said, you are the number one target. If a team beats you and they lose every other game of the season, they'll have had a great season because they've beaten you. And he said, so 0 excuses, you know, that's how it's going to be. Every team is going to be a tough game. And it was just the first time in my life that I'd heard, you know, that winner's perspective of like, you're number one, you know, you are the target. And you don't get that much in New Zealand, you know, maybe if you're an All Black or only really sort of at a school like Auckland Grammar. And for that lesson alone, I think it was really, really, really valuable, you know, because it was like, wow, that you can be out in front, you can be the number one target. You're not always fighting, you know, as the underdog, you know. And so I really enjoyed that, you know, and I actually flourished there, you know.
Well, it's funny because early on you just told that story about you and Jeff Wilson sort of driving each other on. So I'm guessing 16, 17-year-old Dion from the country in Auckland, same sort of thing. You're surrounded by people that are pushing you.
Yeah.
Did you feel like hot shit coming down, or did you feel like an imposter? Like, fuck, I don't belong here. Or did you feel like you were good enough to be there?
I felt like I needed to prove myself fully. Like I was really determined to prove myself. I didn't feel like hot shit. I felt I knew a couple of guys there. There was you know, Blair Pocock, who I'd played against and with, Mike Clegg, who was a very good cricketer and I played a lot with. He was around. Matt Horn had just left, so I sort of had known a few people. But no, I didn't. It was none of that. I just went down really determined. I saw it as for what it was, which was an opportunity, you know. And I thought, I'm taking this with both hands, you know. And I just had a great year. It was like, you know, I won the batting award. I didn't win the bowling award actually, which is, you know, probably the one I thought I would go down and win. I ended up winning the batting award, and just having this great year. We won, but being in the hostel, you know, meeting all those guys, hanging out with guys who were in 7A and 7B academically. I wasn't. I was in way down in 7F, but hanging out with them in the hostel and learning how hard they were studying was like, oh wow, so this is just like training, you know. This is like, okay, just go and do the hours, and you know, guess what, you get better, you know, stuff like that, which I just hadn't been exposed to. And so I just loved it. I was like a sponge. And DJ Graham was so amazing as a headmaster. You know, the effect that guy's had over so many boys that went through those schools, you know, that school, I should say. You know, he was a man of principle and simple, basic rules, and if you followed those, you were okay, you know. But he would accept your argument if it was different, if he didn't care about it. But if you were half-hearted and it was a flaky argument, man, you got spun around so quick. It was like, you know. So yeah, no, it was just great. And what also happened is lots of those guys that I met at grammar were going on to university, and so that's what sort of ultimately got me to uni, you know.
So you went to Otago. What did you want to do then? Did you want to be a New Zealand cricketer?
Yeah.
Or did you have a career plan?
Yeah. My only career plan was to make the cricket team and buy enough time from my parents that I could do it and wouldn't have to work in the mill or the farm. So it was like, man, I'm just like, uni, sign me up. So yeah, I started out doing law because, you know, that pleased everybody. And, you know, I passed law in my first year, but you had to pass much better than I did. And so I ended up doing a BA in sociology and art history and all the big names.
How's that working out for you these days? Coming in handy?
Actually, it was the best degree I ever could have done. It was so like it's a study of people, right? So it was like you know, it ends up being really great for marketing. But I always say I learned how to think at university. You know, I'd been learning how to just regurgitate things by rote prior to that, and I always remember in history, American history, this I was really struggling. I needed to get this paper to finish in my last year, and the exams were coming up, and I've been writing longer and longer essays, you know, and I'd been getting C's and C minuses, and I was like, man, this lady professor, I can't remember her name, was just, it felt so personal. It was like, she's crushing me. She doesn't. And I remember meeting a guy who was doing honours, and he was in my class, and I was like, and I just said, man, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but, you know, I'm just struggling. He goes, well, what are you struggling with? He goes, and I sort of told him, and he goes, dude, you just have to imagine that you were there. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, just put yourself there, you know. And he used the examples of Jackson and the Indians Jackson put them on the reserves, and, you know, retrospectively it's this big deal, you know, these people were put off their lands onto reserves, but at the time it was just Jackson solving a problem and going, man, I just want this problem solved and out of my way so I can get my voters to vote for me and this thing. And so when you put yourself back into the times and think about what he was dealing with, it's a totally different aspect of history than when we look back with that lens, you know. And so that taught me to think, you know.
That's interesting. And was it a good time down there? It was rich for sports, right? Mark Ellis was down there. Who were you rubbing shoulders with?
Oh, yeah. Well, Mark and Josh Cronfield and sort of Aaron Penne and, you know, John Timu. That was the sort of and John Leslie. They were the legends down there because they were in the varsity A team and Otago team. So I was off to the side with all the cricketers. But
any cricketers of note? Who was?
Well, Jeff Wilson wasn't at uni, but he was playing down there. Ken Rutherford was there, so we did really well. We got into the finals when we had a good team. Mark Richardson came down towards the end, and who else? There was I've bounced just to have insulted a whole bunch of people, but hanging out at uni was just great, you know, and we worked hard, played hard, you know. There was just fun all the time. There's always something on.
Yeah. Any good university stories that you can share? Because it was around this time. Didn't Mark Ellis get done for like drunk driving? He was riding around on a scooter with like a watermelon on his head.
Oh yeah, there was loads of stuff like that. I remember. I mean, look. Yeah, most of it you can't retell. If I'm honest,
yeah, a lot of these stories don't age well, do they?
Yeah, no, that's right.
I did hear a story about you on another podcast. You were at a Pearl Jam concert. You're in the front row, shirt off. Yeah. Eddie Vedder got a mouthful of wine, spat it onto the crowd, and you opened your gob. And
I got a good gob full in. Yeah, no, so I thought. I thought I'd been like blessed from like, you know, on high.
So I feel like that sort of paints a picture of the sort of Dion Nash we were dealing with in early 20s.
I also turned up, one I can tell is a few years later that Pearl Jam were back, and we played, I think, either Australia or Zimbabwe in Auckland, and there's a Pearl Jam concert at Mount Smart, and that night, and so I was like, came back to my flat afterwards, you know, we'd won the game, everyone's on a high, everyone's having cocktails and stuff, and so I put my Frisian cow pants, sort of pants on that I bought in London. I've got like some sort of like sleeveless top. Girlfriend's painted like my hands black fingernails, you know, and probably, you know, I don't know what else I had on. And,
Well of Olay all over
you
the
know,
face.
you know, and I'm like, anyway, we turn up and go to this concert and have this great night with my mates at this concert, you know, and I'd arranged to meet the guys at Iguazu, which is on Parnell Rise afterwards, and anyway, so you know, about 11:30 at night, 12 o'clock at night, we've left the concert, we get in there, and all the cricket teams in at Iguazu having their drinks, and so I joined them, and I'm sort of out of the cab and I'm walking in, and this guy, this older gentleman, jumps up from the table at the front of Iguazu and comes down and he meets me, and he comes up and he sticks his hand out and goes, "Dion, great game today, mate." And I was like, oh, all I could see is like my hand was coming out, all this black fingernail polish, as I was like, I was trying to put my hand underneath, I was like, oh, thanks, mate. And then all the opposition team were in there, and I was just like, well, you know, when you all of a sudden you're like, oh, not everything translates as like it should.
Yeah, because it's worth like highlighting. It's a different time back then as well. You guys just weren't wearing nail polish.
No, it was there. It wasn't done. I remember, yeah, it was quite well received at the concert. People were like, it went down okay there, but not so much
with your sports mate.
on Parnell Rise. Yeah,
different look for different group of friends. So so you make the New Zealand cricket team. You were quite inexperienced, right? I don't know a lot about cricket, but it sounds like
I'd played 3 games. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was crazy.
In hindsight, like having been a selector yourself, were you like fast tracked too quickly?
Yeah.
I mean, it worked out good.
Yes, I absolutely was. Yeah, I absolutely was. Like, and you know what happens is what it did. I was fast tracked way too quick, so I went away on tour. But where it really became problematic was then I had to go back to domestic cricket after that, and all of these hardened domestic players who had been overlooked for me then just had it in for me. So then I just copped it really bad for like probably 2 seasons, you know, like, you know, and I was always, you know, everyone's accusing me of, you know, getting screwed by the captain, or, you know, like, and, you know, it was
just blowing the coach.
Yeah, it was all, you know, but when you're 20, 21 years of age, but you don't have the coping strategies to have it when a 35-year-old man's just abusing you for an hour and a half at a time, you know, and it's like, you just don't really understand it, you know. And you look back now, it wouldn't be acceptable now, you know. But like back then, the umpires just did nothing. The young guy just stood there in the middle while you're batting, and you just have a team abusing you for 2 hours, and then you know, and you're like, it was just sort of like the way it was. I'm not blaming anyone. That was the culture of the cricket scene, and it was sort of ugly. And you know, I'm no saint. I went on to do things like that myself to young players later, you know, and it's sort of like you look back now and you're like, man, what on earth? Why didn't someone step in? And that was never the right way for any of us to have been behaving. But it's also human nature, right? Like some young punk plays 3 games and gets picked in the Black Caps, and you've played 5 seasons and you've taken all these wickets and you're clearly a better player. Like, what? You're not going to turn up and give them an easy ride, are you? You're going to be into them.
No, but I suppose the way to do it now would just be to let your cricket do the talking.
Yes, yeah.
Like bowl, you know, make this guy look like a fool.
And there were some players who did that too, right? So it wasn't everyone, but you know, but quite often there'd be a couple of hitmen who would do the majority of it, you know.
And like the fact that you're bringing up now, I suppose this maybe answers my question, but did it sort of taint your experience?
Yeah, I came back from my first tour and I didn't want to play for the Black Caps ever again.
Wow.
Yeah, and it took me a year in the wilderness to sort of go away and just work out and get my love for the game back. Yeah, and you know, there's a whole bunch to that. I was too young. I was too immature, emotionally not up for it. Wasn't treated that well. Didn't perform very well. Then got dropped. Then got bullied. Then got so it was all of this stuff, and you're just like, man, I think I might just go do something else.
Bullied by.
Or just in the domestic scene, I just felt once we got back. But then all of a sudden it was like I actually remember I played a game in Luggett, which is they had this all whites versus all blacks, which was before we were the Black Caps, we were the all whites, and they had this game in Luggett, and some of the old All Blacks would play the cricketers in this game, and I got taken along to it and played in it, and I remember afterwards it was Robbie Deans and Alan Hewson, and Kieran Crowley.
Oh, wow.
Sat me down in this hotel room and had a beer, and I was just like sitting with these legends,
all black greats,
right? And they said, "Oh, so what's the story? You've been dropped?" And I was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Oh, it's okay," and they're like, "No, like it's okay. What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh, well, the new guys, they deserve to be there," And I was
being like, politically correct,
and they were like, "Fuck off, mate. What do you mean it's okay? Don't you want to be there? Don't you think you're good enough?" And they just drilled me. And it was like, I remember thinking, oh, man, that's how champions think. What am I doing? I'm just sulking and being a twit. And I always remember that. And I sort of like, it was that difference between how great rugby All Blacks were thinking and the environment that was the cricket environment at that time. I'd just been left alone, and no one had got around me and said, "Hey, shake this funk, off and get back on the horse," But these guys did. They recognised it, and far out, I so appreciated it. I don't think I've seen any of them ever since actually to say thank you. But and it was one of those things. From that game on, I just had this instant change of attitude, and I was like, that was me getting back on the horse straight after that game, and ended up making the New Zealand team again. And
the reset you needed, eh?
Yeah. But it was that winner's thinking, like Robbie Deans in particular. I just remember him drilling me straight in the forehead, going, "What are you saying, mate? Where?" And I was like, "Oh man," it was just the fire I needed. It was perfect. Yeah.
And in the New Zealand team environment in those early years when you're a young player, was it quite a supportive environment, or was it sort of was it quite cliquey?
I think the players would say they were supportive in their own ways, but they were the product of their environment, right? So it was an individual sport, semi-pro, a couple of superstars. The rest of the people were teachers in the off season and part-time, trying to struggle to make it, travel the world, have a few beers. It was sort of, so we were the cusp of that early stage of true professionalism, and it was only towards the end of my career that we were actually getting paid properly and professional and had the support structures starting to come around. So look, it wasn't all bad. There were good people all the way through, but people were focused on getting their own job done. That was a hard, tough environment. Guys like Andrew Jones, I remember admiring how he went about things, but he didn't have any room for me in that, because it was like he had to get his job done. Martin Crowe the same. Those guys were legends and amazing, but they didn't have time to build the culture, or they didn't have enough support around to build a culture that brought everyone else into that or showed the pathway to that, which that I don't put that blame on them at all. That's just a time and place. If they had been given the support structures the modern day teams have, imagine what they could have achieved.
Yeah, but also, it was like you look at the All Blacks at the same time. There was a whole back row of the bus thing, and if you're a junior player, the senior players wouldn't even talk to you or acknowledge your existence. It's just how it was. Yeah, a mate of mine actually made the remember that there used to be those All Black trials, the possibles and probables.
Yeah.
A mate of mine made the possibles one year, and he was like opposite Fitzy, Sean Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
And he saw him in the hotel for some breakfast, and he went up to him and introduced himself and said, "Oh, any chance of sitting down and picking your brains?" And Fitzy told him to fuck off. I feel like it's a different environment now, different culture and society and sport in general.
Yeah, so many things have changed, but none of that surprises you, right? That I can exactly imagine that happening.
Yeah. I said, let's talk some of the highs and some of the lows. So one of the highs, I'm guessing, 1994 in Lords, which is the home of cricket. You become the first person ever to score 50, then take 11 wickets in a test.
Yeah.
So you weren't known as a batsman, so you weren't particularly good at batting at that level?
I had been a good batter through youth cricket. I sort of always wish I had taken my batting a bit more seriously, but in the end it's the quickest and easiest route that you take, right? And that ended up being bowling. But as a young player, I was probably as good a batter as bowler. But over time, the bowling took over. So I could always bat. I wish I had given it more now, because that would have given me longevity. And it's also one of those things that I don't feel like my statistics or really do justice to how good a player I was.
Does it bother you now? Or
of
not?
course.
Does it? Like, so when sometimes in the shower, is it something you think about, or when you're driving the car?
Just pops up randomly. You can't control when it pops in, but no, I mean, also like the I got injured a lot, right? So it was just the bowling side. I was always playing injured in the second half of my career, so you're always dealing with injuries and recovering from injury. So even the windows that you got were always never quite pure. There was always something limiting you or holding you back or whatever. And so being a better batsman than my statistics showed, I probably should have put that to the forefront and really driven that side of it. But again, I just mentally wasn't up for that challenge at the time. You get worn down by a bunch of things and you take the easiest route, I think. But I do pride myself. It's one of those things that everything is in its place. But I went to a friend's. One of my best mates got married in Jamaica. Married an American girl, and we went to the wedding in Jamaica. And it was this beautiful, amazing wedding off the cliffs in Jamaica. And in American weddings, you have the wedding before the wedding, which is the sort of run through. But that's when all the actual speeches take place. So it's sort of like it's more formal than a run through. It's a more casual version of the wedding. It's quite interesting. And then the formal wedding happens the next night. But at that, the father of the groom got up and introduced me to all these Americans, and he said, this is Dion Nash. He was one of the players of his generation in cricket. And I've always thought, because I'm always uncomfortable with how you never know where you fit in the whole echelon of cricket, and everyone looks at statistics over time. And I just thought that was the best way I'd ever felt. I felt comfortable with how that described me, for that era, for my era, I was one of the players of that generation, and it's like, along with the other guys who did well in that era. And I think that's a really clean way of saying it. And it's like, that's all you can be, right? And in your time period, are you one of the best players? And did you do well? That's sort of it.
You got to captain for a while. Like, in the history of New Zealand cricket, how many captains have there been? 20, 30? I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's a funny little thing, though. The only two teams I played against as captain, I did, I did test match, a couple of, what did I do, three test matches, I think, and 5 one days, or 4 1 days, I can't remember, 5 1 days. Anyway, but the only people I captained ended up both being done for match fixing. So so it was like Hansi Cronje and Mohammad Azharuddin, who were both great players, but unfortunately, across the line. So I always wonder whether my results are slightly tainted.
We'll never know. So, so that 1994 game at Lords, is your name on an honours board there at all? I've had Mark Richardson on the podcast, and his name's on an honours board for getting a century there, and he's never seen it. But he said if he saw it in real life, you'd be quite emotional about it.
Yeah, so they've changed that actually. So they've changed the things around. So when it first happened, it was on the other end of the room, and it was like sort of quite a cream coloured board, and we got into trouble because Blair Pocock got up and scratched my name in a pencil, and it was like,
Good Lord.
And I was like, oh my gosh, and so that got covered up as a thing that happened. And anyway, so, and then I went back to play there for Middlesex a year later, so I got a contract. So I saw it all the time because I'd just go out and, see, oh yeah, it's still there. But I went back recently, because Triumph has asked to sponsor Middlesex, so I went back and we were sort of Middlesex guys, and they showed me around, and I went into the room, and they'd changed it all. It's all totally different, and the Honours board's down the other end, and so it's moved down. It's not a big dark mahogany one now. So, even at the house of the home of cricket, they changed things. But yeah, it is emotional. It's like all the great events of that have happened, and so it means a lot. There's a lot of great players who don't have their names up there, so it's a good thing to be.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah,
like it's there forever. Like it establishes you as one of the greatest cricketers of all time.
Oh well, I think see, that's where I always get uncomfortable, right? It's like I think there's only probably 3 players I would put into that category in New Zealand history, and and there's probably a bunch that sit below that and who will be totally offended, but I only put probably Martin Crowe, Richard Hadley, and probably Kane Williamson in that echelon of that I would say are greats of the game, and the rest of us at different times have done wonderful things. Some people are pushing up closer into that realm, but those people sustained it and were the elite in that grouping for their whole careers. Some have popped in there at different times and dropped out, and others have done 1 or 2 decent things. So, but which is not to diminish how I feel about my things, but the reality is I got over a 10-year career, I played 30 tests. I think in the same period of time there's probably 100 tests played. So I've missed nearly 2/3 of my career through injury. So it's just that alone rules you out of having the numbers.
Yeah. Although, I mean, you're a music guy, so there's Beatles versus the Stones. Like, the Stones have got longevity. The Beatles didn't have longevity, but
well, no, you're right. And look, in the end of the day, like we're all just I'm just trying to place it in a way that I feel comfortable. Like I know I could have done more, but then at the same time, you come back to this guy, and this guy believed in a whole lot of stuff that was not aligned with being a professional sportsman, and I'm proud of those things that he believed in as much as the things that made him good at sport. So, I carry all of that, and I'm proud that I stuck to those things. Spoke up at times and stood out and did the wrong things blatantly at times. I'm as proud of those, and as much as I regret some of it, I'm also proud of it. So
all right, well let's get into that. So. Yeah, from 1994 in Lords to the 1995 weed smoking incident. Now, a lot of people listening to this wouldn't have even been born at the time. A lot of them won't remember it, and maybe this will bring back some memories. But this was a big fucking nationwide incident at the time. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So where in the world were you?
South Africa, Paarl.
So, and you, Stephen Fleming,
Matthew Hart.
Yeah, you all got done for smoking pot.
Yes, yeah, we did, big time. Yeah, it was crazy. A game got called off early. It was Christmas, so we were touring in South Africa, and we were there over Christmas. So it was a long time away from home. Game got called off because of a dangerous pitch, which in itself I think has only happened twice in the history of the game. That a game's been called off because of a dangerous pitch.
What does that mean?
Well, it means when the ball was bouncing, it was just going in straight and hitting people in the head or hitting them in the toe. It was just unplayable. So they called the game off because someone was going to get hurt. I think 3 people got hit in the head in the first hour or something. Right. So we ended up with an extra day, or extra 2 days that we hadn't accounted for. So, and of course we're in Paarl, which is the wine growing area, party area of South Africa. It's leading into Christmas. Everyone's partying, and we ended up getting at short notice involved in this vineyard, invited to this vineyard with some of the opposition players. And long story short, one of our team and one of the opposition teams started talking about pot around the table. And there's about 11 of us all around this table, maybe more. And we all started saying, yeah, I've smoked it. I've smoked it at university. Other people said similar stories. And the next thing, after we'd all sort of verbally got involved in this conversation, then this big bag of pot comes out on the table. And it's like, I remember thinking, shivers, this is like been sort of now we're into this. It was a bit, and I remember that, but I remember thinking, Flem's here, that'll be okay. At least I've got a buddy in Flem, he was a young player, and there were a few senior players around, and one guy in particular had been pretty vocal, and I was like, anyway, they started rolling those joints and handing them around. Anyway, it came all the way around. I had a puff, and everyone else had a puff. And then I remember thinking, shit, the most vocal guy hasn't had any. And I remember thinking, man, that's...
Who was that, a New Zealand guy?
Yeah. And I remember thinking, man...
You don't want to say who it is?
No. It's not. There's just no point in saying any of it, And it's like, but I just remember thinking, that's what I shouldn't have. I didn't have to. I remember thinking, I didn't have to partake.
Was it an element of peer pressure, or?
I felt a little bit like that. I just felt, but I'm not blaming anybody. I was fully into. I did my own thing. I made my own decisions. But I just remember thinking at the time, shit, that guy hasn't had any. And then after a little while, I remember Flem and I must have got uneasy about it, because we just said, let's get out of here, right? And so, but we got out of here by stealing a joint. So
for later.
And we're like, so we went back, and so actually and this is where I felt really bad, because we went back. Hardy, the three of us had practiced so hard. We'd stuck together with the young kids on the tour. We'd been actually doing really well, and so we went back and got Hardy, and we're like, hey Hardy, and so we got Hardy involved. And then, that was it. And so then the party went on, and didn't think anything about it. Next morning, we all went to this practice venue instead of playing, and it started raining. So they stopped the practice, and they pulled us all in, and they said, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk about what happened yesterday, and so can call you in one by one. So they went into this room, and they said, Dion, can you come in? So I came in, and I'm coaches and captain and everything, and they said, we've heard you were smoking pot yesterday. Is this true? And I was like, yep. And then they said, we're really sorry to hear that. So I'm on my way, and so next person was walking in was Flem, and as he walked past, I said, Flem, this is what they're going to ask you, and it's all right. I've said yes. I've taken the rap, so just deny it, and he was like, mate, I can't do that. So he walked in, he said yes. Third person was Hardy walked in, he said yes. And by this stage, we'd all got back, or I'd got back to the main group and told them what was going on. And of course everyone was just like, you stupid, what are you thinking? So and then everyone else just did, just said, and so we just did, and I don't, again, it was a terrible situation for anyone to be put in, right? And so I don't blame anyone for it, because it wasn't like, many of them probably felt weren't really involved. They probably felt much like I initially did. It was a bit of peer pressure. You have a couple of puffs on the way around. I was like, I'm not fessing up for that, So, it was a bit of, but then where it really got ugly is when we flew home, because they sort of, at the time they said, okay, we know more were involved, so end of story. And then we flew home, and then at a later date, New Zealand cricket got wind of it. This is about 6 weeks later. And
so from a team environment, they tried to sort of keep a lid on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then everyone flew home, and there were a whole lot of other politics going on in the background, which I won't bore people with.
Yeah, but were you still down for any matches, or did you get told off by the senior leadership group? Or?
We got told off, disappointed. Yeah. But we're also...
But
there were also people who we knew that... So everyone was like, you guys are idiots for owning up. But
the hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah. So we're all sort of like in it together. So it was sort of wasn't.
But also that would feel like a good line in the sand. I'm not talking about it being a cover up, but a line in the sand. Like you smoked a bit of pot at a fucking party, big deal.
Yeah. And so we flew home, and we were playing in the Shell Cup final I was playing for Northern Districts, and we were playing Wellington at the Basin Reserve. So this is, I'm pretty sure it's the Shell Cup final, and it was about to go out. It's about 9:30 in the morning. We're starting half an hour later or something, and the chairman of New Zealand Cricket meets me in the tunnel and hands me a letter, and he goes, "You might want to get a lawyer for this." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, and then Matthew Hart was in the same game, so he hands the same letter to Harvey, and it's literally, I'm about to go and play this Shell Cup final, and I open this letter, and it's like, you've been called to some court hearing that you've been accused of smoking pot on tour for South Africa representing New Zealand. I was just like, all of the blood drained out of my body. I was sitting in the tunnel just reading this thing before going out into the Shell Cup final, and I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And my head was just spinning, right? I just thought, that's the end of my career. We played the game, and I can't even remember the game, what happened in it. But I just remember thinking, shit. Anyway, so then we went and got lawyers, had to lawyer up. We all had to go and meet in Auckland, and it cost thousands of dollars to go and represent ourselves in this sort of kangaroo court. And,
so was it out in the public at this point or no?
No. But so we sat in this meeting in this kangaroo court till about midnight or even later, arguing our case, right? Saying, because they had a judge.
Was it like a judicial...
Some sort of review, but
right.
It was pre all of this stuff. There was nothing set up, so they just set it up. And so we had our lawyers. We each had a lawyer each. New Zealand Cricket had head of New Zealand Cricket and lawyers, and there was a judge adjudicating, and we all had to present our cases. And in the end, they just said, "You're guilty. We know you're guilty, so we're going to suspend you and fine you or whatever." And I was like, and so we just walked out. And the next day, this is at midnight, we walked out of the meeting. The next day, it's all through the papers. So they must have already told the papers what was happening way before we left that meeting. And I remember but the worst part of it all was having to ring my father. But when I got that letter, going home afterwards and then having to ring my father from Auckland and say, "Dad, how well everything's been going recently." It was about to hit the skids because of and so that was one of those phone calls you don't even really want to make. But it does, like, now people go, "Oh, smoking pot, what's the big deal?" But literally back then we had Paul Holmes turning up to our parents' houses, we everywhere you went, people were either offering you joints or abusing you for being a pothead, or a drug addict.
Everywhere you went, as in when you're fielding and fans on the embankment,
so we'd play. The game was New Zealand Centenary, so we turned up to Eden Park, or the team turned up to Eden Park, and there was just the whole of Eden Park was filled with get off the grass, and they'd used all the things to make big joints, and it was just people were Rastafari and things everywhere. But everywhere you went out afterwards for about 2 years, you'd go to a pub and some guy would always come up and go, "Hey man, you want to come outside?" and you're just like, dude.
Are you kidding me? You can look back now. Again, it was almost 30 years ago, so you can laugh about it now. But I'm guessing at the time it was not funny for many years.
It wasn't funny, It was like intense. It was like what it did do is I think it brought Stephen Flem. It's interesting. Flem and I don't really have much to do with each other anymore. But for a period, I think it galvanised a younger group that like Flem, myself, Chris Cairns, Nathan Astle, Adam Prory, a younger group that was coming through, I think felt really galvanised by it. And I think it helped in a way, because it was like, hey, let's be honest with each other going forward, let's not do that again, but let's try and get some things right.
Yeah, look out for each other, support one
another. And so I think there was a good things came from it, but there was a bit of scar tissue there for sure, like it was just like, because you just want to be focusing on that, and you don't want to, even though I had smoked pot, and even though you just don't want to be called a pothead or a pot smoker, it's just you want to be known for the thing that you're good at, and so it was just a
How was your mental health at the time? Like, mental health wasn't even sort of a thing.
I watched.
It wasn't something we talked about.
I watched the Beckham documentary.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Have you watched that?
I did. Yeah, where there's people like burning and hanging effigies of him outside bars and stuff.
I'm not saying for a moment ours was as intense as that, but it was a version of that. You know, like it was full on. We drove home. My father made me listen to the talkback radio as we drove up north to go into hiding. Like, I literally had to go into hiding for about a week. You know, I just went and hid out on the back of the farm, no ill communicado. But my father, who'd been down at the hearing, he just like drove for 2.5 hours all the way up, and he made me listen to talkback radio the whole way, and it was
sort of like punishment for your actions.
Purgatory, and I'd be turning it off, and he'd turn it back on, and it'd be like, and I was like, and you know, you just had these. Honestly, you'd think we'd killed people the way people were carrying on, and of course the radio hosts were like ramping it up, and it was just like, man, it felt intense. But like it was just like one of those things that you sort of go. Really, the one funny little story that did happen is I had a Middlesex contract. I'd already got that contract, but this happened in between. So I got this letter with my work visa to go to the UK to pick up my contract, and I was just hanging out to get to the end of New Zealand summer to get out of the country to go to that. And they sent me a work visa so I could get into the UK. And on the front, they'd written this thing saying, "Hey, we've understood." That you got caught smoking pot. Of course we're disappointed, like New Zealand Cricket, but we do understand it was a one-off. It's not part and so as long as it doesn't happen here, we're happy to have you and live up to our contract.
Cool.
So I was like, sweet. So I turn up to Heathrow and I walk in, and the lady at the counter's like calls me up, and I go up and I hand over my work visa, and she's reading the front letter, and she pulls it off and she hands it back to me, and she goes, "You might want to hold on to this one." And it was like, and I was like, oh, shit. I was like, yeah. So she goes, I hope it was a good time or something as I walked through. And I was like, I probably shouldn't downplay it too much, because A, you were away, like representing your country. B, pot. We understand now that it's not as harmful as what maybe we thought it was back then, but still, it feels like the lashing that you guys took definitely outweighed. Oh, it was. Look, yeah. I mean, I can't. It was bad. We did something dumb. It was dumb, but like, you know, it also probably didn't deserve quite as bigger hit as we took.
Yeah, there was no social media at the time either, right? Like, imagine that.
That's probably good.
Was you, after your dad got the initial like anger or whatever out of his system, was he like quite sort of empathetic, or?
Yeah, he was.
They sort of come around.
Yeah, he was good. He came around, but you know, it hung over me it was leverage for him for a little while. It wasn't short of playing the odd little guilt trip on me.
So what you went through is probably like the Australian guys with the sandpaper thing, probably how they feel.
Oh yeah, he only accused me of letting the family down probably once a month for about 6 months, and then it went out to once every 6 months for a couple of years, you know.
And were you seeing, this was pre-Bernice, eh? Were you seeing anyone at the time? Like, did you or did you have a good group of friends that you could talk to about how you were feeling? And
all my mates were from university, so they all thought it was fucking hilarious, right? Because it was like, oh my god, you know. And of course I outed all of them, and then I always remember the girlfriend I had at the time, who she was great, and but my mother rang up to talk to her to try and, you know, ease get another side of the story. And I always remember Shelley, who was my girlfriend at the time, saying, oh look, he hardly smokes any at all. He's probably only done it a handful of times. And I was like, oh, no. You know?
Yeah, I know you're trying to help, but sure.
Yeah, it was like, yeah. So, yeah. Then it all kicked off again. It was like, Mum was like, well, Shelley says.
Yeah, well, it's just an unimaginable shitstorm for anyone to go through, and especially when there's no sort of end in sight. But has it made you a stronger person, built that resilience, do you think, in a way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just what you go through, right? You can't live any other experience. It's just what it is. Your experience builds your perception of the world and your viewpoint. And mine will always have these sort of things that influence how I perceive things. And I would be a liar if I said they didn't have some negative impact on that. Maybe was slightly less trusting after that. A little bit sort of angry at people for a long time. Just felt quite a lot of injustice, personal injustice. I always had a sense of injustice for other people, and but I always felt like I didn't need any. And but I think after a while, but when you go through something like that, it's like that very intense sense of like that's unfair on me, that, and so I think that you go through all of those things, but you just have to shake it off, and I think we all dealt with it differently, but no, I mean, I wouldn't. I would like, you can never do it, but part of I think when we helped set up that players association was just, it was a recognition at the end of my career when we were all trying to work out that you need these support structures around, to prevent things like that happening. People need mental support, they need advice, they need physical support and advice, all of those things if they're going to be successful on the park. And I would say there's still some development to go there, and even today, but it's much better than it was. So
well, your duty of care wasn't even a phrase back then, was it? How old are your kids now? And did you bring this up with your kids at any point, or have they read it online? Have they asked about it?
There's no secrets, they know it all. No, I think they think it's a little bit funny, if I'm honest.
Your dad was cool once.
No, they don't think that. They definitely don't think that. I think they think it was funny. Stupid. Stupid funny? I don't know. Definitely not cool. But, they're not... no, they're cool with it. They're like just...
Dad's just dad.
Yeah, they know what I'm like, full stop, so they know the good, the bad and the ugly, so.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. Well, let's wrap the bow on the cricket stuff with a couple of fun stuff. I found a clip on YouTube of you taking this amazing catching the great Brian Lara out. Like you're running backwards and you get this catch. Any stories about anyone else, any of the greats, like Warnie, Brian Lara? What was your relationship like with Warnie?
I didn't play Australia in test matches a whole bunch, but I had a good relationship with Warnie. He was just a jovial, good guy, like super competitor. Best story I can tell you about Warnie is I was playing a game of cricket in Sydney under lights one day in like say 1996, something like that, and he bowls this ball called a flipper, and it's like this. It was this mystery ball, right? And it was big, all this press and PR about it, right? And anyway, so old Muggins here, batting away, and Warne comes in the bowl, and he bowls this ball, and I go to smack it out of the park, and I get clean bowled, right? And it's like, and he just like gives me this big send off, and I walk off, and like there's this bit of commentary of going, what on earth was Dion Nash thinking, And then anyway, so that's in 1996. 2000, maybe 2001, I'm playing Australia in a test match at the Brisbane, and Shane Warne comes in to bowl, and it's the first ball he comes to bowl to me, and he comes in, it's bright sunny day in Brisbane, and he gets about to bowl, and he stops, and he leans down, and he rubs his hand in the dust, and he looks at me and goes, "Remember Sydney, Nashy?" And I was just like, what? I'm like some Joe Nobody that you bowled out in 1996 in a one day in Sydney, and you still remember it, And he was like, "He's just making the point. Watch out for my flipper. It's coming, and I've got you once already." And I was like, "Mate, it sort of actually had the opposite effect. It made me feel really good that I even knew who I was. It was like it's great, Shane Warne." So
that's neat.
Yeah,
that is. Yeah.
But that shows you the competitor he was, right? He was into everybody. He just wanted to knock you over. He didn't feed it anything. So, but yeah, I mean, I had always had great battles with Tendulkar. Like I got him out about 6 times. Perori was the best keeper. I would only ever have Adam be my wicket keeper, but he did drop Sachin Tendulkar twice, so I should have had him 8 times. Adam denies it outright, but I'm pretty sure there's video evidence out there that I can find if I work hard enough. But Tendulkar was the great. him and Lara were the two greats of my time. And you know, I had a few run-ins with Steve Waugh and the Waugh brothers, but I just loved playing in the era. You know, it was just sort of one of those times you had these big characters. You know, Waka Eunice, Wazzy Macram, you know, Curtly Ambrose, Alan Donald. You know, like there were just these massive personas that you had to sort of, and I don't think you can quite articulate what it's like to go out against massive egos, massive personas, and just to exist out in the middle against those people, you really have to, you know, you have to sort of exude that same sort of like persona, you know, and fake it, because you know it's not natural to have it. But it's like, it's just being part of that is exciting, you know. It was a massive challenge, and when you have those little bits of success against it, it's just amazing. You know?
Yeah, and I wanted to know about that. It's like, I mean, I suppose I speak on behalf of like almost everyone that's going to listen to this podcast that will never achieve anything close to greatness in our life. Like, what was it like retiring at 30? Is it terrifying? Do you have like a post-career depression? Like you go through these like extreme highs that none of us get to experience, and then suddenly it's like your new life is beginning. Yeah,
you do. You do. It's like it lasts for ages, way longer than it should. You know, like initially there's a little bit of a high. It's like finally, because I only retired because I was having so many injuries and I was just so tired of it. You know, emotionally I was drained. I just the continual getting injured and having all the media say, oh, he's injured again, and every family member say, oh, why don't you just bowl through it, or you know, why don't you just get fitter? Every friend, no one understands.
Yeah.
You know,
did you ever try medicinal weed?
No, there wasn't even a thing then. It's like, it was like, yeah.
Sorry,
I probably self-medicated a few times.
Yeah, sorry, breaking your flow there.
Yeah, no, but you know, like, so you get out of it and you're like, you know, you just walk away and think, thank God that's over. But then the further you get away from it, the more you're like, oh man, I didn't achieve as much as I should. And you have all this sort of regret and this sort of a scar tissue from it, you know, that builds up, because it's like, man, I got, you know, you feel certain times you're mistreated, or, you know, whatever. And then that lasts for a long time. And I guess why I'm so grateful for having met those guys at 42 Below and now for having my own business is I just managed to stumble into something where I had another creative outlet. And I think sport is quite a creative outlet. You know, I know people don't necessarily associate jocks and with creativity, but they are quite aligned in a way. And certainly from a passion perspective, you know, that takes a lot of passion and you deep dive into it. And so I think I feel really lucky to have had that. But man, for years, you know, because it's something you've done since you're 12. It's what your whole identity is wrapped around in, is becoming a cricketer. And then you do it until 30. That's the majority of your adult life, or your entire adult life, and the majority of your entire life, that your identity has been wrapped up with something. And so then you step out of that, and it's just like, it's both frightening and exhilarating. It's like taking the training wheels off in a way, you know, and riding your bike. And it's like, man, this is exciting, but shit,
terrifying as well.
You know, and how do I work the brakes? And of course, what happens is every now and then you crash, right? And when you crash, you have those bad times. That's when you just long for, oh man, I want the security of my identity back. But I think I worked out at some stage in it that, like any player that finishes, I did commentary for a while and even some TV work, you know. And I just sort of felt that it was really unhealthy for my psyche, because I felt like I was becoming a caricature of myself, which was something I was trying to shed away from, you know. And so I didn't want to go into that. I wanted to move away from it. And so I sort of made this conscious decision not to carry on with that side of it, and try to get into something else. And I still think that was a healthy decision, even though at times you know, you still sort of you feel like, oh, maybe it'd be easy to go back and dabble in this sort of stuff. But I think certainly at that time for me, I needed to make that clean cut and get away, you know, and try to carve out something else.
Do you enjoy reminiscing from time to time, like today, or is it a pain in the ass?
I enjoy it. No, I do. I enjoy sometimes I'm sick of my own voice, you know, like I want to, what I want is the next adventure to be exciting. And like, I've got this great adventure going on with Bernie at the moment, you know, like we've got this beautiful family. We've been, Bernie and I've been married 20 years, and it doesn't even feel like quarter that time, you know. And I feel like, you know, we're just getting sort of like started in a way, and watching our kids grow, and, you know, trying to be a better human myself so that they can, so I can show them that I can evolve and change, and, you know, is a challenge, and I'm enjoying that, you know. It's like I'm totally committed to that, and fucking it up often, you know, like, you know, way too vocal on the sideline at kids' sports, you know, trying, you know, like.
Are you not conscious that people will be like, that's fucking
of course I'm conscious, but that drives me on to sort of make it worse, you know. I'm good at digging holes, Dom. But like, you know, I'm quite good at climbing out of them as well. But you know, that behaviour is like, you know, my father never was vocal on the sideline. So, you know, as my father's just passed away, I'm like, man, I want to be like Dad, you know. I want to just show that I can be stoic on the sideline and enjoy the wins, the losers, or whatever. But it's hard, man. Auckland kids sport in Auckland is so competitive, you know, and it's like, it's full on. So there's all of those things going on. There's like trying to run a business, trying to make sure that I put bread on the table, enjoying watching Bernie's got a great job and she's got her career going. So enjoying watching her. She's a few years after, you know, she was a sort of stay-at-home mum for a long time.
Yeah,
so.
What is she doing? She's I don't know if this is by design but she doesn't do a lot of podcasts and stuff, eh? Or
she's head of people and marketing at Hyundai Group, which is so it's a really big job, like great. She's doing super well, and loving it. You know, she's having her, I guess, sort of corporate time, which I had 10 years ago or whatever, and I think she's getting that sensation of success. You know, we always need little wins, don't we? You know, just to keep ourselves bouncing along from lily pad to lily pad. And I feel like she's having a really good impact on the people around her there, and you can feel it. You know, she's like anyone, she's good and bad days, but that's exciting to watch and see that develop. So I don't know. I'm just enjoying. I love the moment. You can sit on YouTube and sort of, you know, get all this advice around how to, you know, live in the moment, how to, you know, be grateful, you know, be mindfulness. I know it sounds cheesy and all of that, but it's so, wouldn't it have been great to have that 25 years ago, you know, and just, you know, just
like from what I know about you, you've been ahead of the curve though, eh? Like you were journaling like at a young age. Like from teenage years.
Yeah. Well, mainly doodling initially, and then some pretty dodgy poetry. You know, I remember I had my own little Jim Morrison phase at university where I thought I was, you know, writing some pretty wicked poetry. Anyway,
so Bernice, for anyone that doesn't know, like Bernice Minnie, she was when you were in the New Zealand cricket team, she was like the star of the Silver Ferns. Like there was a McCain's ad that was on TV all the time, where I'm pretty sure it wasn't her dad, but she got a phone. She was preparing like a TV microwave dinner, and the phone on the voice would be, I just want to make sure my girl's looking after herself, something like that. She was a big star. So you guys met, you ended up being at Soul Bar or something, and you shouted her a tequila. It
was my birthday. I'd come home from India injured again, so I was with my niece and my sister had taken me out on my 28th birthday. So I was like, I was moping around the house thinking, and then they said, come on, let's take you out. So I was having this big raging night with my niece and my sister, and I ran into a friend, and he owned a restaurant called Le Monde. Ran into him at some bar, and he goes, so come down, I'll shout you guys a dinner. So he takes us down to his restaurant, and we just walk in, and it just so happened the only table there is right next to this group of netballers. And so they'd just lost the world champs by 1 goal against Australia, and that was sort of in the news, and they were having their debrief. I didn't know that, but so I was like, oh, this is awkward. I'm going to sit down. I don't know any of them, but I'm going to sit down the table next to them. So how do I navigate this? So I thought, I'll just go and buy a round of tequilas and bring it back, and that'll break the ice.
You were a big star at the time, though, right?
Oh well, I don't know. Well, I was well known. I was in the New Zealand team.
Yeah.
Had been captain, and so yeah. Anyway, so I brought this round of tequilas. I took it over, and Bernie always likes to say, she said she thought, oh, that's Dion Nash, and then one of the other girls said, isn't that Dion Nash? And then one of the other ones said, who? So
yeah. Was it just a timestamp? This is pre-smartphone, so you can't just Google and go, oh yeah, that's
right.
cute.
Yeah.
So anyway, how did you end up 20 years married from that?
Well, we
just swapped numbers.
Yeah, no. Initially, no. I tracked their number down by somehow, and then it took a while. It didn't all happen straight away, but eventually I managed to hook up with a date with her when she was in Auckland. A month or two later, I can't remember, and I took her out for a date night. There's a quarry jump where I was always into jumping off high things into water, so I did the Pelorus Bridge jump. So I was always like, right, let's find the next highest thing, right? And so there's this quarry over in Takapuna in Lake Pupuki, and you used to be able to jump. I think you still probably can we used to go and jump, and it's about 8 or 9 meters. It's reasonable, and you got to jump out over gorse, and it's a little bit thrilling. So anyway, I my first date I took her there and said, hey, let's go jump into this lake. And she was like, okay. And so anyway, I got her in a bikini on her first date, and I got her jumping off this high cliff. I thought, okay, this girl's all good. I like her. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So then so she so that was, and then it sort of kicked off from there. But yeah.
Amazing. All these I suppose I don't know. Yeah, it must have been good meeting someone that's sort of like a peer, like that's an equal. So there's no sort of power imbalance. Like if you're fucking stressed pre-game or whatever, she's sort of got some sort of understanding of what it's like in high performance sport, the highs and lows of all that.
Yeah, and she'd had her own share of injuries, and she was largely quite loved, though not as quite as controversial. I always felt. We got this thing from the Southland Times, because she was playing for this thing at the time in Invercargill, and it's the front page, or the flyer that they sell the paper with. So it goes out, and it's it's just a headline, and it sits in the sort of Southland Times, and it's like, our Bernice is engaged, and I was like, oh my god, what have we got? I'm taking on the whole of Southland. That's cool. It's like, so yeah, so anyway, so yeah, but that was a buzz, that was a cool time as well, that whole Sting thing, because Dean Harper was going out with Jeff Wilson, and Tanya Dalton and Dwayne were down there, so all these boyfriends we were like the wags. We'd fly in from Auckland in to watch these Sting games, and it would be like a sort of who's who in the crowd. It was quite funny.
That's neat.
Yeah.
And so is she taller than you?
Yeah. Yeah, she is.
How was that? How was that? Was that weird in the beginning?
Yeah,
for both of you?
There was definitely like a clean out of the shoe closet. That's what all of those ones are going out there. So, well, she's 6'2". I'm not quite 6'2". So it's close, but no, she's definitely taller. It was. It wasn't what I was intending. I'm sure it was to be the short person in the relationship, that's for sure. But yeah, well, I just think when you meet, she's such, Bernie, she's just such a engaging person, and we just were so compatible. She just loves humans. She loves talking, and she brought out that in me. She got me out of my shell, and she's just a wonderful person to be around. And so, talk about creating a positive environment around yourself. That was the biggest tick I could have made. It was just like, wow, this person's, I just feel great. And like you say, she never dwells on things, and she never dives off into negativity or feeling sorry for herself or anything like that. And so you can't be like that if you're around a person who does like that,
No.
It's just you at the moment you start having any of that behaviour, you're like, oh my god, I'm letting this show down here, I've got to get my shit together and get up and play on the same terms, So I think that's been a really positive thing for me,
God, that's wonderful. And so you've been together like 25 years now, like
Oh yeah, well,
late 90s?
03, 01, 02, 03. So yeah, so what's that? 21 years. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So yeah. So no, sorry, that's marriage.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, yeah. So pre the last millennium. Yeah.
Have you got? I mean, you don't get that far in a relationship without having any rough patches. Yeah, have you had any counselling or anything, or are you just naturally good at communicating on your own and working through obstacles when they come up?
She's pretty straight, man. Like it's like if I'm playing up or doing it, just she'll just, and vice versa. To be honest, like no, we like anyone. Of course, there's rough patches of whatever, but no, I mean she's just got my back, and I think I've got hers, and part of all of this dope smoking and the, maybe the scar tissue of our sporting careers. It's really important to feel like someone's got your back and you're living up to their expectations, And
you did right. You've used the scar tissue thing a couple of times, and I think whenever anything like this happens, and this is quite sad, but your circle just gets smaller and tighter, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 100%. And it's like, and then you build out a little bit. I think now, and you start to build out a little bit, right, and bring there's other people into it and change, but. I mean, we've travelled a lot. I think that's a cool thing to do as well. We went to South America when we first got together for about 4 months, and we travelled around, went way up into the middle of the Amazon, and people couldn't even speak Spanish. They were speaking Quechuan, and we had all these crazy experiences together, which was that sort of tested our metal. It was like okay, if we got through that, we can probably last at least a couple of years of marriage.
Yeah. Oh, how good. And how old are the kids now?
17, 15, 13.
Right.
Yeah.
Shit, so you guys are going to start being almost like empty nesters soon.
Yeah. So the oldest one's starting to look at universities. He's in his last year at school. Mate, it's crazy how quick it goes through. And but exciting as well. The best thing we've done recently, we after COVID, I had my 50th during COVID, and we'd saved up to have this big party, and of course couldn't have it. So we're like, well, let's go to Europe, and take the kids to Europe, because we had saved some money, and so we planned this family trip to Europe. And wow, what the perfect ages to take the family away, and just to have this family trip somewhere when in the middle of summer in the middle of Europe was the best thing I've ever done. It was just like seeing your kids exposed to other cultures and just their worlds opening up, and just somehow took a lot of the pressure. I think sometimes being from New Zealand, there's a lot of pressure in the smallness of the place, because it feels so competitive. It feels like if you don't, whereas I think seeing the world and just going, man, the world's so big. Somehow my sense was it relieved a lot of internal pressure, certainly from my oldest one. And it was just like, wow, this is an adventure out here, there's so much to do. And just seeing whether it's real or not, that was my perception. And seeing those little growth things happen in your kids is just enriching,
And are you proud of yourself as a dad?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I'm also, Chris Kenz and I weren't always mates. We used to butt heads a lot, and we came up with this saying like years and years ago, which was, I think we're having an argument. He was like, "You just don't respect me," and I said my retort to Kenzie was, "Respect is not something you earn and keep; it's something you keep earning." And it was like, and he's never let me forget it, but he loves that saying now.
It's a great line. No, I've never heard that. It's awesome.
And he, and it's sort of true, but I didn't even know what I was saying. I was just trying to win the argument with him, I think. And but it's funny, like that's true of being a parent. Like it's like every time I do something dumb or I do some silly thing as a parent, or react badly, or just grumpy and angry when I should have just been mellow and cool. I have to re-earn that, but I feel I have to re-earn that bit of respect. It's like, shit, I just blew it. It was all going so good, and I did that.
Because in our household growing up, like in the 70s and 80s, it was always, do as I say, not as I do. I feel like you can't get away with that now. You have to lead by example.
Totally. Yeah.
Oh, so Kenzie, you guys are quite close, right? Are you quite good friends? Or do you
Yeah,
sort of-
well, we are. I mean, but I think a lot was made because he went through all that match fixing and his problems, and now he's obviously got his health issues, which he's doing amazing to come back from.
oh man, I love following him on Instagram. His journey to teach himself to walk again.
Yeah, incredible, right? It's
And the match fixing stuff, like whether it happened, whether it didn't happen, it kind of puts everything into perspective. I think in a way, on the big scheme of life.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, like Chris and I, by the end of our career, we're good mates. Adam was a good mate. We probably were. You sort of get a bit cliquey in different groups, and the three of us were probably good mates. We had others as well, but that was probably a bit of a core, I would say. And then, so, you stand up for them. But look, I would have stood up for Stephen Fleming or Nathan Astle or Roger Toos or Jeff any of those guys that we did stuff with during that period. They were like brothers, really. And I still, even though through all of this sort of, there has been some separation, but I still think of all of those guys like that. I have ultimately all have their back, and I hope they would have mine. And that's part of what I hope when we get together in this reunion, we can sort of just be together again, but no, Kenzie's doing great, and it's tough, right? Like going back to leaving the game is tough enough without having to go through all of what he went through, and now having all these health issues and personal issues and stuff. So, we all need to be there, don't we, for our mates?
Yeah, 100%. Shit, this has been a hell of a chat. This might be the long. You didn't have any meetings lined up, did you? I'm sorry. This has been over 2 hours.
Oh shit! Sorry, mate. I always remember John Bridges. Remember John Bridges from TV3?
Yes, yeah, of course.
So I went to a function once, and he is a corporate function, and he got up and he spoke, and he said he was giving advice to speakers, and he said the first piece of advice is when someone asks you to speak, just say no. And when everyone's like, what? And he goes, whenever someone asks me to get up here and speak, I say no. And then it said, if they come back and they ask again, I still say no. And then if they come back a third time, he said, then I think about what it is they want me to say. And if I'm really passionate and I've got something to say, then I might say yes, but I might also say no. and he was basically saying, like, just unless you've got something really worthwhile saying, just don't get up there. It's not worth it. And which was a really, it was a good message. I got it. It was like, yeah, you got to have something to say. And so I do feel like I've got something to say, but then at the same time, I'm like, I'm sick of the sound of my own voice. So I did think as I was coming here today, I might have to offer my resignation to all podcasts after this one. I've reached the pinnacle. I've reached Don Marby's podcast. I can now officially retire.
Yeah, no more. Well, if this is your last, I'm pleased, because it's you do have a lot to say. It's been a hell of a life, and I think the exciting thing is, there's someone that's like the same age as you. It's you get to, I don't know, when I was in my early 20s, I thought life was over by the time you got to 50.
Yeah.
And then you get here and you realise, oh no, you can still grow and still develop and still change as a person. And I think that's really exciting. You good with aging? I'm
excited. I'm actually really excited. I've got so much to develop. Like, imagine if it was all done, right? It would be like so boring. I'm really excited. I definitely have some things I need to work on and get better at. And I want to get better at, I did meet I went on this course once, and I was being problematic within it. This is only about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was challenging the people presenting it, and anyway, and this lady comes up, one of the presenters comes up to me towards the end at a break, and she goes, Dion, with mana comes great responsibility. And I was like, oh, that one. So I have to think about that for a minute. But
isn't that from Transformers?
I don't know.
Spider-Man.
I don't know what it was from, but I was like, it was true. It was like, she was basically accusing me of throwing my weight around without any care, and being smart enough to do it, but not respecting what the group needed or whatever, And I thought, that was a good timely poke in the ribs, and so I think that's the thing I'm probably trying to work on at the moment, is just being aware of the impact that I can have, good at both positively and negatively, and trying to sort of like, learn when I need to just leave the room and go and regroup myself, because you know, I'm an oversharer, as you've probably just worked out, and an over talker, and you know, sometimes in doing that you just actually needed to have stopped half an hour ago, probably like this podcast, and then leave, and everyone would be fine. But because you stay, you overanalyze it, you over talk it, or you just end up getting tired and saying the wrong thing.
Yeah, well, I think from my perspective, I think this has been great. Like, there's nothing I'd edit out, and I appreciate you being so open, especially about the stuff in like the 90s. Yeah, I heard a podcast just recently that Ali Williams did with the Between Two Beers guys.
Oh yeah,
I've been on their podcast. I know you have too. And do you remember he got done buying some cocaine in Paris?
Yeah, in Paris. Yeah.
And he said, when you make the news, people say it's tomorrow's fish and chip wrapper or whatever. And he goes, and that's true for everyone else, but not the person involved.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like that's true for you. It seems like it was an ongoing thing for a while. So I appreciate you, raking over those old coals.
Yeah, and look, I mean, as I say, it's like everyone else everyone we touched on in that, they were on their own journey, you know. So I don't hold any of them. I don't hold any grudges. That's one thing I genuinely feel. I don't have a single grudge against anyone. I think anyone, how they behaved was always justified all throughout, you know. So, but it doesn't change what I went through. So that you know that was a personal thing. They didn't have to go that I did. So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's all just part of the journey, right? It's exciting. I don't want to keep going on, but I watched my father die just a couple of weeks ago.
How old, by the way? 90?
94.
94.
No, 1 month short of 94, so 93. But
never made it to 100, much like yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fell short. Yeah, should have done more. Should have achieved more. No, but it was like one of those things. I don't know. You reflect a lot, and I don't think I've fully processed it, but I guess what I would say is, like, if you know, have the conversations you want to have with your parents now, because by the time you realize you want to have them, it's sort of too late, you know. Like, the aging process does catch up with people, you know. And my father was, and what I think happens is Dad was still had all his faculties, but you know, not to the point where you can have a philosophical discussion. And by the time I wanted or felt I could have that with my father, I'd left it too long, you know. And so I think having a better relationship with your parents just can never start too soon, you know, and demanding to have those conversations soon.
It's hard though, because it sounds from what I've learned about your dad today, like he's like just quite a stoic, hard Northland farmer. So if you don't have that sort of relationship, not necessarily a friendship, but that father-son relationship that a lot of other people have, it's hard to just sort of like manufacture that yourself as an adult. It's
almost that's it. And I couldn't manufacture it, and in his own way, it wouldn't have been Dad, you know. So he didn't, but which is not to say Dad was philosophical. He had like. He was a quiet, stoic guy, and there's that unwritten thing of like, I don't need to tell you this because you already know it, and of course I did, but it didn't mean I didn't rally against him going, fucking tell me it though, you know.
But also, yeah, I don't know what was said or what was left unsaid, but you know, I'm sure he must have been immensely proud that he gave you the poem "If," as a poster as a boy, and that ended up becoming the name of your business. Like, is that something you discussed?
No, we never did. But
like, whenever you've mentioned triumph and disaster and the root of the name of your company, you've mentioned him, and I suppose that was a badge of honour for him.
Well, I don't. Yeah, that's what I sort of mean. I think it's like you know.
You weren't a verbal family.
Not with my not with my mother. Yes, it was like like mum was different kettle of fish, but Dad was like the opposite, and it was like. But I admire that in him too. You know, like that's the thing. I think we get so wound up in, you know, all these different things, and it's like sometimes you know, you can understand people through silence, right, and just being with them and understanding them, right, and it's like we know more about people. You know. Not all communication is verbal, and I think that, you know, sometimes I did find sorry to carry on. I'll shut up in a minute. But
No, mate. I'm good as long as you're good.
Well, I did find this thing. The thing I said, which I really like at the moment, is this intellectual honesty. I said this in another podcast with the guys at Mandate, actually, who are awesome dudes. You should meet up with them. They cool.
I've been on their podcast. It's great.
Cool people. And anyway, but like I found myself talking about like intellectual honesty, and I was like, I reckon that's the thing that social media has really taken away from us, is this ability to make a statement and then hop out behind a pseudonym. It's like, if I want to have a proper conversation with you, I've got to take your opinion in the spirit that it's given and within the context that it's given. And it's so easy to take out of context one thing you've said, inflame it and twist it a little bit and say it back to you and totally misrepresent you. And what does that achieve? It helps me win my point, but it doesn't help us win a common goal of understanding each other or working towards a solution on a topic. You know? And I feel like that we need to fight for that intellectual honesty in all of our conversations that we can possibly have, because that's the way we're going to move forward as a country, as a people, as, you know, just generally. But also, I think when you're really honest with someone and you really listen, it forces you to listen and go, and then you can learn. And I think that's what I'm most excited about trying to do, is learn a bit more. Like I feel like you reach a landing, and I feel like sometimes you close down because I've got all this information that's got me to this point. I just need to consolidate this now, and that stops you then bringing in more information because you want to make the most of where you're at. And sometimes, and I just feel like I'm at the cusp of like going, actually, you know what? I actually need more information, and I want to bring it in and open up and change and evolve a bit more. And I'm open to that now. You know, like there's stepping stones all the way. Some people I think can keep it on an escalator, but I tend to just have to keep getting to landings and control it a bit more.
That's you've got a growth mindset. So I feel like you're always going to be trying to grow and expand and you get the best out of yourself. And I suppose one of the great lessons that maybe you got from your dad is how you parent your own kids differently.
Yeah.
You learn some stuff to do and some stuff to do differently. Yeah. I suppose that's the blessing in a way.
Well, I also think the one thing I would say, kids are so smart. They don't whatever impact I think I'm having is just about, it's the reality of it is about 1% of that, you know. So I'm far less important than I've made myself out to be. And like they just, or at least in the sense of what my message is to them, I can see my oldest son looking at me and going, you know, whatever. And I'm not, and I can sort of almost see his mind thinking, going, man, I'm not going to be like that, but I'm going to, you're over this side. So yeah, but but hey, well, listen, thank you for having me on here, because I've enjoyed it. I feel like I watched a bunch of them, and you know, because we watched a bunch of the early ones, and then, you know, you've been so prolific that I couldn't keep up. But when I thought I'd come on here, and I think what you're doing, I was really encouraged by watching it and just going, well, you are asking really smart, relevant questions, and people are responding to that. And I think that's a skill, right? And that's why you've been successful. I think you've, like, you know, I'm not just blowing smoke. It's like, it feels like it's a really important thing, you know, to have conversations like this. So I just, you know, I hope you don't run out of, you know, Kiwis to do it. You might have to move overseas, but like, it's so enriching. And I didn't watch them all the way through, but every person I was like, oh man, Zach Guilford, you know, when I watched that, I was like, wow, you got Zach Guilford to offer up some stuff, you know, like I was like, man, this is awesome. Matthew Ridge, I was like, that was an awesome. He got the Warriors bit wrong. You need to get him back in, because it was 2 years ago, and it's just before all of the wires is kicked off.
Right, yeah.
It was like that.
We'll get him back. And Adam Perora, your old mate, like
I haven't watched that. I've got to go and watch him. Mark Richardson, I saw Mark was great too.
Yeah, it's bloody great. One thing I'm realizing is that absolutely everyone is dealing with some shit.
Yes,
and everyone's going through something, and I don't know. When you realise that, it's quite comforting in a way. It makes you feel less alone with what you're going through.
Of course, yeah. And it's just it's just
But
a
hey,
process.
mate, I can't thank you enough for your time. As you know, I've been a big fan of your work for a number of years, so it's good to find. I suppose you're one of those names I've had on the back burner. It's like Dion's just around the corner. We'll get him on one day. But you've been a great support, and I'll never forget that Triumph and Disaster was the first brand to come on board as a sponsor, because you don't forget these little things.
No, you don't. And but thanks, it's been awesome, and I'm stoked to see it all going well. So, if we I'm sure our paths will cross again.
100%. Now, when are you doing a fragrance? Are you going back to working on a fragrance now?
It's in the pipeline, actually, so it's coming. And that's I'm more nervous about this than any of the other ones we've done, because it's like, it's got to be right, So you don't, because, this is what you personally wear as your signature. So we're waiting on 3 more samples coming in from Europe. First round's done, so it was probably a few iterations away, but hopefully we're getting pretty close after this next set. So
awesome. Yeah. Any like sneak peek about what the scent is? How do you describe it?
When I've got the next one, I'll come down and you can be part of the process. How about that? So
if you smoke some weed, can you spray someone and it disguises the... I
think you can, yeah.
It's a cheap shot, I'm sorry. Hey, Dion Nash, thanks so much, mate.
Awesome. Good to see you, bro.